This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of What If Naruto Became Juubi during Chunin exams. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel, and now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Looking at Haku and Zabuza, Naruto was trembling and unconsciously started to back away, saying, "Impossible." Naruto. Haku said as he moved forward, but he had to leap back when Naruto abruptly produced a kunai and slashed at her. "Hat the hell, Naruto. What the fuck do you think you are doing?" Zabuza snapped his head at Naruto after catching his adopted daughter. Naruto then threw a raptor shuriken at Zabuza, his eyes narrowed into slits. "Back off. How dare you impersonate the ones I cared for most?" Naruto's chakra started to unintentionally leak, rapidly darkening in color, revealing his anger. "I saw it." Tears started to fall from his eyes. "I saw that damn Cyclops run his damn rakery through her chest. I saw them both die. This is all a lie." Naruto's chakra started to thrash around as it split apart. He charged at the two and swung at Zabuza, slicing the bandages on his face. In order to prevent the kunai from moving further, Zabuza grabbed Naruto. "Damn," Zabuza said. "How much power does he have in his body?" While he was not looking, Naruto kicked him square in the ribs, leaving him with no time to think. Naruto turned to face Haku as Zabuza collapsed, growling with rage and fury. He swung at her, but Fu and Yugito grabbed his arms and attempted to stop him before he could finish. To her surrogate brother, Fu screamed, "God damn it, Yubaka, they are real." The grip on Yugito was beginning to slip. "Knock it off, you moron." "Shut up." Naruto escaped Yugito's hold and punched her in the face before turning to face Fu and hitting her in the sternum, knocking her to the ground. As Naruto turned to face Haku, who was trembling in terror, he roared to the heavens. In other places, Gaara lifted his staff to bludgeon the Kumo Jinchuriki to unconsciousness as Karabi was about to begin rapping out another song. While Roshi and Han were busy putting on earplugs, Amaru was actually sitting motionless, anticipating it. Gaara and Utakata were attempting, but failing, to maintain their composure. Moka and Ora were talking. When they sensed a demonic aura, everyone became alert, and not just anyone's, but Kyuubi's. A pillar of twisting chakra was visible as they turned to face the direction they sensed the Yuki was going. When Karabi said, "Let's go," everyone stood up and ran in the direction of the pillar, where they knew Naruto would be. Ora and Moka went along because they didn't want their new friend to suffer any harm. "Naruto is back." Naruto started to creep toward Haku, his nails growing into claws, his teeth exposed as saliva trickled from his jaws, and he lifted them to strike her down. Haku was shaking because she knew that Naruto was a Jinchuriki. He sobbed a lot when she told him because he thought she would despise him, but his Jinchuriki status proved that she did love him. She shut her eyes, but then she recalled that Naruto was aware of her Kekkei Genkei, that she was the only one with it, and that no one could identify it. "Please let this work," she said to Naruto as she started to gather chakra and applied hand seals. With the intention of eliminating the imposter, Naruto swung his claws downward. Naruto stopped dead in his tracks and exclaimed, "Makio Hyosho. Impossible. How can she?" Naruto's thoughts were cut off as ice mirrors started to surround him. No, but Haku. Chan was. He looked at the imposter's location and saw her get up and start to approach him gently. He was so relieved that he did not even move. "Naruto. Please," she said, reaching for him, but being burned by the chakra surrounding him, she retreated. She fought back tears as she reached again, pushing through the chakra and grabbing Naruto's arm. Naruto's demonic aura started to fade, his eyes started to normalize, his nails grew shorter, and his whisker marks also returned to normal. He trembled and extended his hand to her face, asking, Haku. Chan?" Haku tightened his grip on Naruto's arm as she reached into her shirt and gently pushed a portion of it away, revealing the Chidori scar on her chest. Naruto reached forward, his eyes never leaving the skin where the scar was, not believing what he was seeing with his own eyes. All of the other Jinchuriki leapt into the clearing, prepared to unleash their demonic power in a split second, but they halted upon witnessing the scene. Ora and Moka jumped into the clearing, blushing slightly at what they saw. In front of Naruto, a young lady who was genuinely beautiful was undressing to some extent. Ora gasped as she recalled the memory demonstrating how Haku would employ that technique. Naruto was tracing something on her person when his eyes widened and he noticed the ice mirrors surrounding them. Her eyes widened as she took a closer look at the woman with Naruto. "She is alive?" she asked. Naruto was too preoccupied with the woman in front of him to notice the other Jinchuriki yet. He gazed into her eyes, which were filled with love, compassion, and emotions that only Haku had ever displayed to him. Haku. Chan?" she asked. nodding as she put her arms around the blonde. Yes, it is me, Naruto. Koi, and I will never leave you again. Naruto could take it no more, so he sobbed uncontrollably as he held Haku close to him like she was his only hope, crying into the shoulder of the only woman he had ever truly loved. Returning to Konoha, his mother got up in a fit of rage and asked, Haishi, what is the meaning of this? Haishi kicked his mother in the stomach before swiftly turning on his aunt and uncle. Haishi struck his father in the chest, sending him backwards as he coughed up blood. Isn't it obvious? I am pulling the cancer out of this clan, once and for all. Haishi pushed his fingers into his uncle's eyes, administering a tiny dose of chakra that was sufficient to destroy the retinas. Cancer? What cancer? The only cancer in this clan is that failure daughter of yours, his uncle exclaimed. You elders are the cancer. I went to see my daughter in the hospital, and I find that not only was she injured by techniques that should only be in the main house family, but also that she has several seals on her, which I never approved of. So what? She is just a useless weakling, unworthy of the Hyuga name. It is fortunate that she loves the son of the Yondaime. We can claim even more power if we marry her to him. Haishi kicked his father in the face as his father got to his feet and spat out the blood that was forming in his mouth. As he started to perform hand seals, Haishi growled at his mother and yelled, Haishi, as your mother, I am ordering you to cease this at once. Futon. Daitopa, he exclaimed, finishing the hand seals, you haven't been my mother, since you allowed my brother to walk to his death. Haishi spread his arms wide as a wall of chakra crashed into the elders, sending them through the paper walls behind them. How dare you? How dare you stain our clan by learning such a technique? His father asked in disgust as he activated his Byakugan. How dare you? How dare you stain our clan by learning such a technique? Haishi grabbed his father by the throat and made him look at him while his hatred flowed from his eyes like a river. Haishi put his hands around his father's neck and said, Bye, father. He then shot chakra directly into the old man's neck, severing his spinal cord and ending his life. Because unlike you, I don't have such high arrogance that I believe I am unbeatable, and this is a perfect example. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu, Haishi said, turning to face the other elders. At that moment, a water dragon started to swirl around Haishi, and the nearby pond exploded. Using a jutsu, without hand seals? Impossible, his mother said, trembling. Haishi glanced at the dragon and then back at the elders, saying, Kill them. The dragon roared as it charged at them with unbridled rage, tearing up the landscape and tearing into the ground before crashing into the elders. With a sigh, Haishi turned back to face the house, but not before he extinguishing a candle that swiftly ignited the paper house. As the branch family assembled to watch the elder house burn, Haishi left the house with a look on his face that no one had seen in years. Satisfaction with Naruto. That evening Naruto sat in front of the fire, caressing the girl's hair and humming a lovely song to her while holding her in his arms and refusing to let go. The other Jinchuriki gazed at what they saw. Kurabi turned to Yugito and asked, So, how did you do it? Gazing at her surrogate brother, Yugito grinned. Nibi. Chan possesses a unique ability that allows her to bring back to life people who passed away 6 months or less ago. It's likely that Haku and Zabuza were dead for no more than 4 or 5 months. She brings them back to life by giving up one of her 9 lives for every person who perishes. Kurabi stared at her in disbelief. What? Fu practically yelled. How much time does she have left after giving up a portion of her life force? Yugito gave Fu a smile. The beauty of it is that Nibi can undergo a process known as phoenixification. She gained power by eating a phoenix before he had a chance to change. Or so she says to me. Yugito perspired at her Biju as Nibi sighed in her head. That blasted phoenix was a bastard. I would have done worse, especially when he tried to grope me. Nibi, you are something else, I tell you. Nibi purred and grinned like a cat. I understand, but if I weren't, we wouldn't be so close. Yugito shook her head angrily, but she also grinned at her friend's antics. With a raised eyebrow, Yugura said, What the hell is phoenixification? Yugito turned in the direction of Sandy Jinchuriki. Well, phoenixification is the process by which a person can reincarnate from their burned remains after passing away. Phoenixes are able to do this repeatedly. As the Jinchuriki leaned closer, he said, Bakaneko naturally live 9 times longer than any other Yuki type. The only type of Yuki that lives nearly as long are Kyodaigame Yuki. But even they'd not live as long. And if someone were to devour the phoenix's remains before such a thing occurred, then the one who devoured the remains would be capable of reforming themselves when they are killed. Nibi, however, has taken this the next step. Wow, said Amaru. Glancing at Yugito, it is just like Ribi's ability to regenerate itself, albeit not quite as advanced. Yugito started counting in her mind. I don't know, but I know that Nibi transferred 2 of her 9 lives to Haku and Zabuza. She now has I think she now has 5 lives left, or was it 6? Oh well, she thought. The truth is that Nibby can only use that technique a certain number of times before she is never allowed to use it again. Utakata turned to face Yugito and asked, how did she lose the other life if she only lost 2 from reviving Haku and Zabuza? As Yugito turned to face her seal, she winced. She lost her first life when she was first sealed inside my grandmother by the Shiki Fuin seal. The following day, Konoha, the majority of the shinobi, with the exception of those who essentially worshipped the ground the Yondaime walked on, arrived with great protest. The Konoha shinobi were all assembled in front of the cage tower. They had been summoned here by the Yondaime via message. The Sandaime had vehemently refused to leave, instead sitting in his office and destroying the documents while yelling at Minato for being such a fool. Once I tell them why I left, they will understand. Minato raised his voice and said, citizens and shinobi of Konoha, I wish to announce as to why I left my son, Uzumaki Naruto here, years ago. The crowd roared in rage as he, Kushina, and Sora approached the balcony and surveyed the group of shinobi. The crowd started to slowly quiet down as Minato turned to face them. You all may think I left him out of favoritism for my daughter, but I left because my son needed to learn this power on his own, and me being there would only serve to impede both of them. I specifically instructed that my son, who carried Kyuubi in his body, be hailed as a hero when I departed, but none of you even did that. I'm not saying that you should have worshipped him or kissed the ground he walked on, but he should have been seen as a human being. The one who protects you all from the Kyuubi's wrath, said the civilians who mistreated Naruto, looking down. What gave you all the impression that he was the Kyuubi incarnate when he was actually a living scroll with the ability to command the Kyuubi at will? While the shinobi started to reflect and fall for their leader's words, the civilians looked down. One citizen, who was either incredibly courageous or incredibly foolish, said, how could someone have a demon inside of them and not turn into it? Nothing could possibly be possible. The shinobi became enraged with the civilian as some of them started whispering. The reason that isn't feasible is because the Shinigami himself strengthened the seal. Do you honestly think I would seal a demon inside my son and not guarantee my child's safety from it? Gasped the audience. The Shiki Fuin seals the demon's soul and power inside a given host, and with the Shinigami's power makes it impossible for someone to break free from it. The crowd, aware that the majority of them had tortured Naruto, looked down in shame. Yondaime. Sama, please give us a chance to redeem ourselves. Let us make it up to your honored son, said a civilian. Screams of approval were heard, particularly from the general public. Minato sighed, unfortunately, I cannot at the moment. My son Oz left the village for the Chunin exams, so you will not be able to ask him of his forgiveness. The civilians looked dejected at this, but I can promise you that he will accept your apologies when he returns. The populace cheered in agreement. Why don't we find Yondaime Sama and bring him back? We can't possibly risk him getting hurt out there, Ebisu said. There were multiple cheers of approval, which made the Yondaime smile. You can go, of course, and report back here in a few hours if you want to find him and bring him back here. As the crowd erupted in applause, Minato grinned and said, in his eyes, he knew that his son would be able to forgive him, just like all of his shinobi have. He had won them back to his side. Not all of them, though. Tuchi and Ayame continued to glare hatefully at the Yondaime, and Azuki Yugo, Gekko Hayate, Sarutobi Asuma, Yuhi Kurenai, and Gai Maeda were not so forgiving. Returning to the mountain with everything but his boxers off, Naruto was lying on his back. Moka and Ora were blushing, and for the same reasons, crying, while Haku, who was nearby, was trying to contain her tears and nosebleed when she saw his scars and his torn abs. Taking notes while examining the seal on his stomach, Utakata's Biju had been wondering why Naruto had found it so difficult to draw on Kyuubi's chakra. Most seals weren't designed to totally cut off a person's chakra, and even those that did weren't nearly powerful enough to contain a Biju's power. So how did Naruto's seal manage to do that? With increasing agitation, Utakata traced the seal over a series of lines, and I can tell that this is not the original seal. In fact, it looks like several other seals were slapped together within the original seal. But what was the original seal? He said, this is probably the most complex seal network I have ever seen, but there is no way Naruto could be capable of safely drawing on the Kyuubi's chakra with this. The six-tailed slug sent the hand seals to Utakata via mind link, and Utakata grinned as he heard his Biju say, Utakata, I want you to perform the following hand signs. Many thanks, Namakuji. Ninjin, you're welcome. Ninpo. Fuin Keizeki, ninja art. Seal analysis. Utakata traced all the markings that made up the seal, the information transferring to his mind. What he saw shocked and disturbed him. Utakata performed the hand signs, finally stopping as his fingers started to glow. The seals used to change the master seal disgusted Utakata. One filter seal transformed all of the body's Yuki into natural chakra, but due to the poor quality of the work done on it, it actually produced a poison. Additionally, there were 3 suicide arrays. Should the master seal, which holds Kyuubi, ever be destroyed, the host would be killed automatically. Additionally, due to the poor quality of the seal, the death would be extremely painful. Additionally, there was a special chakra locking seal that prevented Naruto from ever using the Kyuubi's chakra properly. However, it appears that the seal was partially modified to permit some Yuki leakage. Last but not least, and this was the one that most repulsed Utakata, it was a special leeching seal. Any Yuki that was caught in it would instantly be transferred to Naruto's reproductive organs, and the resulting child would have to deal with one of several possible outcomes. The offspring would either become pseudo-Jinchuriki, which would make them extremely irritable and eventually turn them into Yuki themselves, or the Yuki would create a new bloodline. The former is more likely to occur. The Yuki would prove to be too poisonous and kill the infants before they were even born. When Utakata finally started to learn about the Master Seal, his eyes widened in icy rage. The seal that was used to seal Kyuubi was the Shikifuin, which the original sealer had essentially bastardized. However, this one was altered to save the sealer's life, but the problem was that the person who changed the seal didn't try to learn what happened when he did this. The Shinigami offered the Shikifuin to the mortal world, but the cost of using the scroll is always one's soul. The seal's caster circumvented this with the altered seal, but since Naruto is the one with the altered seal on his body, he will die and be sent straight into the Shinigami's stomach, where he will be tormented and suffer for all eternity. Utakata got to his feet and started breathing rapidly, attempting to control his rage. Gaara approached his friend and asked, "Utakata, what happened?" Utakata sighed as he started to explain the seal that Kyuubi was held in. Since they now knew that the person who sealed Kyuubi was Naruto's own father, everyone was both shocked and disgusted by this. "Oh Naruto. I am so sorry, because of your father Haku sobbed into Naruto's shoulder as he ran over to him, who was clenching his teeth in rage at learning that his own father had condemned his afterlife to be an endless nightmare. "He is not my father," as he went on, Haku turned to face Naruto. "Fathers don't leave their kids for someone else. They don't use an experimental seal on them. They don't curse their kids with pain because of some foolish scheme." Naruto got to his feet and drew a kunai, declaring, "I am Uzumaki Naruto from now on. No more. I am no son of the Yondaime. I am not his family. I swear that I will never, never ever, carry the name of Namikaze, or Uzumaki, ever again," Naruto said, stabbing the kunai into his palm while allowing the blood to flow. Naruto tore the kunai out of his palm, letting his blood drip from his hand. "This, I swear." Gaara, who was a very honor-bound man, saw what the Yondaime did as an act of dishonor above all others, and he detested the fact that Naruto's own father, he was a sperm donor, made him a sacrifice because he was too cowardly to accept the Shinigami's deal. The Jinchuriki looked at Naruto with pride. With a laugh, Amaru approached Naruto and said, "Naruto, don't worry, we'll fix that seal, okay?" She turned to face the Jinchuriki, who nodded their heads. Utakata took out a scroll and started drawing seals. It was a challenging seal, combining a storage seal and a unification seal. It also included a defect repair seal to eliminate any traces of toxins in Naruto's body. After 30 minutes, Utakata turned to face Naruto and said, "Now look Naruto. This seal is going to be extremely painful to apply. Honestly, it is going to feel like 1,000 knives being stabbed into your stomach. So unless you have a pain tolerance to withstand the damage caused by an S-rank fire jutsu, you are going to die. I am more than qualified, so let's get this seal fixed right away." Haku interrupted Utakata as he was about to explain that they needed more time to complete this task correctly. Zabuza stared at his adopted daughter, wondering what she meant when he said, "If he says he is overqualified, then you had better believe he is not joking around." Naruto. Has been through physical torture that would drive the most malicious of the 7 swordsmen into insanity. Utakata murmured, "All right, but I need a few people to hold him down. The Yuki will slip out a bit, enough that it may cause some severe damage, so I need a few of you to hold him down, preferably people who either he will not attack, or he will not be able to harm." "He is my love, I will hold him down," said Haku as he proceeded. "I have no intention of letting my daughter be harmed," Zabuza asserted. "I am more resilient than any other creature," said Moka as she approached, "and I don't want to see him get hurt. And it has nothing to do with the fact that we might want to taste more of his blood?" Moka shushed her inner self and moved forward. Aura rose to the occasion. "Why not? It means I can rub it in his face later that he couldn't hurt me." Utakata stood above him and started tracing the area where the seal would be placed using a mixture of his own and Naruto's blood. It started to sear into the seal, causing light wisps of smoke to come off. Naruto cringed slightly at the sudden burns, but he soon started to ignore it. The four of them each grabbed a limb. When Utakata applied the final seal, he said, "Alright, now, Fuin," and slammed his palm into the seal containing Kyuubi, forcing the other seal to start tampering with it until it took its place completely. As the pain started to rip through his abdomen, Naruto screamed. The Kyuubi's red chakra started to lash out like a hail of whips and explosions. Haku took his other arm, and Zabuza took his. Moka and Ora followed suit with his legs. As the ground beneath him burned from the raw chakra output, Naruto was flailing. Haku winced when she noticed that her arm was partially burned, but she was shocked to see it start to heal as ash fell off her body. What the hell? She asked herself. She was pulled out of her reverie as Naruto started to tremble in agony. Moka was recovering from her injuries, but she was beginning to feel dizzy. "I need food," she said, collapsing but clinging as firmly as she could. Even though Ora wasn't burning, she ascribed it to her eternal Mangekyo, which gave her immortality. However, she couldn't understand the water shield that encircled her limbs, saying, "I really need to figure this out later." Zabuza had the same thoughts as Haku, but he ignored them. The Jinchuriki managed to remain upright, but the four somewhat normal beings were flung off balance when the seal finally completely covered the space where the previous seal had been and drew the Yuki in with such force that it sent a backlash wave of chakra. "Damn. Not even Kisame caused me this much pain in our sparring matches," Zabuza said after he was able to stand up but collapsed to one knee as he started to feel the pain of holding onto the burning blonde. But Moka, Haku, and Naruto were all unconscious. Moka was unconscious due to hunger, Haku was unconscious due to chakra damage and abrupt regeneration, and Naruto was unconscious due to the seal's alteration. "The three of them need their rest, for now. Let's make sure they are okay," said Han as he approached them and picked up Naruto. Yugito and Fu then picked up Moka and Haku. Nobody knew what would happen the next morning, so the three went to the campsite, set up on a medical station that Amaru had constructed by locating a big flat stone, and covered themselves with a blanket. The following morning Moka opened her eyes and let out a groan of hunger. She attempted to move, but her range of motion was restricted because she was so exhausted that it hurt to move at all. "Baka, if you don't eat, your strength will be useless and you won't have the energy to use it." Moka winced as she tried to move, but as soon as she smelled the faint blood, her nose twitched. She turned to see Naruto lying beside her. A source of food, now is the perfect time to feed. Moka started to approach Naruto's neck, not sure if she did so consciously or not. "Her body seems weaker, and it looks like she wants something from Naruto. She said, drawing a kunai from her pouch. "I will wait and assess her threat level," she said, unaware that Haku had woken up and was now observing her. Moka started breathing on Naruto's exposed skin as she drew closer to his neck, feeling her heart pounding. She was going to bite into his neck and start drinking. "No, if what he said is true, then he has lost enough blood against his will," she said, stopping as soon as she saw one of the scars. Her heart ached as she pushed herself away. Moka tried to stand up, but a sharp pain shot through her body. She clutched her body and stifled her scream of agony as tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. When Haku noticed this, he questioned, "What is wrong with her?" She rose and extended a gentle hand to Moka. Moka felt as though her body was on fire, and she was so hurt from not eating and fighting her own instincts that it felt like her father had punched her. Then, she felt a light touch on her shoulder, and as she turned her head as far as she could, she saw Haku staring at her worriedly. "Moka, what's wrong?" Moka bit her lip and clutched her stomach, trying not to scream in agony as she tried to smile at Haku. It's nothing, really, Moka, you aren't alright. Damn it, what's wrong?" Haku leapt over Naruto, who was still asleep, and started examining Haku to determine what was wrong. Was G. Going to drink N Naruto's blood B. But he has lost E. Enough blood ag. Against his will, Moka moaned as she attempted to respond. I need blood." Haku's eyes widened. "My K. Kind F. Feeds on BL. Blood to serve. Vive." Moka twitched as her body started to attempt to act out her instincts on its own. Haku glanced between her and Naruto and said, "Shit, this is bad. If what she says is true, then she doesn't have enough movement in her body to move close enough to Naruto to get blood anyway. But maybe." She looked down at her own arm and clenched her fist, making the snap decision that a little bit of blood is nothing. She grabbed a kunai and cut open her palm, winced in pain, and held the palm above Moka's mouth, saying, "Here, drink." Moka glanced at the blood, and without hesitation she grabbed the hand and started to drink up the falling blood. Haku winced, but as the blood was drawn out, she experienced a strange feeling in her palm that was somehow pleasant. When Moka finally stopped drinking and sat up, she said, delicious. Almost as good as Naruto's was when I first got here. Haku gave Moka a questioning look, and Moka started to feel uncomfortable. I will tell you later, Moka said, sweating. Returning to Konoha. How could I be so stupid? Of course Sensei would not abandon his son so nonchalantly, and besides, it was our fault his life was like it was. I intend to make up for it. Kakashi Hatake, who was beaming with joy as he stood in front of his sensei, had fully bought the Yondaime's speech, as had Rin. In front of the assembled shinobi, Minato said, all right, I want you all to look everywhere my son might be. If you find him before the Chunin exams, bring him back here. I'm sure he'll show up on exam day, but I don't want to take the chance of him dying out there. My daughter will go with you. Sora left and joined Kakashi's group, which was composed of Rin and Yamato. Hi Yondaime. Sama, the assembled shinobi said, dispersing to find Naruto. Minato and Kushina grinned to themselves, knowing that Naruto would undoubtedly pardon them if he was fully informed of their reasons for leaving. Or so they believed. That afternoon, back on the mountain. Now that he was awake, Naruto was astonished by his new seal. He had always questioned why the seal that was applied to him to hold Kyuubi didn't look right, and now it appeared stable. Alright, so what are we doing now? He asked, turning to face the assembled Jinchuriki. Fu moved forward. According to Shichibi-chan, this place can house our demonic chakra while we properly release our Biju. This way, we can properly train for the next month. We will spend a few days training here, then we will go our separate ways and head back towards Konoha. In that time, it is assured that we will be much stronger. Naruto nodded, and Karabi moved forward, asking, alright, so how do we do this? The Jinchuriki followed instructions, while Moka, Ora, Haku, and Zabuza took a step back. Everyone, gather around in an organized circle evenly spaced apart, and repeat after me. The Jinchuriki followed instructions and charged chakra into their palms, finally performing hand seals, after Karabi slammed his palms together and said, everyone, charge chakra into your palms and follow these hand seals. Since he had never received proper instruction in hand seals, Naruto was having some trouble, but he was able to keep up. When Karabi exclaimed, Kachiyose no Jutsu, Kachiyose no Biju, the Jinchuriki slammed their palms into the ground as a series of symbols and kanji appeared before them, causing some of the grass to burn. At last, they all finished on a snake seal. As their seals started to convulse, they all went to their knees. Eventually, the seals started to change as different colors of the chakra materialized in front of them. The chakra started to swirl and start to solidify. As their chakra forms evolved into those of flesh and cloth, the shapes started to solidify. After a while, there was a burst of light that blinded everyone nearby. The jutsu was finished, and when the light went out, 10 humanoid figures appeared in front of each Jinchuriki. In human form, they were the 10 Biju. The Biju's human forms left the Jinchuriki, vampire, Uchiha, and Hyeten users speechless. The Ribi no Manhiru wore a no mask with the kanji for 0 on it, full black gloves, and a black full cloak that covered the entire body from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet. Unexpectedly, the Ichibi no Shukaku was a woman. Her arms and face were marked like veins, and her hair was sandy blonde. Her pupil was golden with 4 stars inside, and her eyes were black where they should have been white. Her skin was rather pale, and she had a lovely C-cup bust. She held a big halberd in her hand and was dressed in a kimono the color of sand. The Nibi no Bakaneko had long black hair with blue highlights and was a woman as well. The hair seemed to glow with an ethereal fire as the sun shone on it. Her figure was on par with Mitarashi Anko's, if not larger. She had golden eyes with cat-like slits, but not quite. She wore a sensual dress, held a tri-blade claw glove, and had a slightly bigger bust than Shukaku. It was a male Sanbi no Kyodai game. He was wearing green hakama pants and had very short sleeves. His body appeared to have been burned and scarred numerous times, and his hair was a little green and spiky. He didn't blink with his left eye, and his right eye was missing. Over his shoulders he carried a large staff with a camellia at the end. Additionally, the Yanbi no Saru was a man. He was rough on the outside and had dark red dreadlocks. His arms were scarred and heavy. He wore a headband with 2 prongs that swung back. There was a flicker of fire in his round eyes. He was dressed in a pair of red hakama pants and a full suit of what looked to be slimmed down samurai armor. He was holding a metallic gauntlet with claws. She was the Gobi no Urukama. She had long white hair and very pale skin. She was a powerful woman with red markings beneath her blue eyes. Her arms were slender and had a distinct muscular structure. She was dressed in a white kimono with designs of waves and wind. She most likely had a mid-B-cup bust. She held a pole that resembled a staff and had a big fan on it. A fat man was the Rokubi no Namakuji. His white hair was slicked back, and his eyes were beady and black. He had such pale skin that it was almost impossible to see through it. His legs and arms appeared somewhat frail, but his aura belied this. He held a bubble pipe in his hands and was dressed in a white full silk kimono. Another woman was the Nanabi no Kabutomushi. She had a big smile on her face and hair that was spiky. On the basis of appearance, she appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s, and her complexion was tan. She was dressed similarly to Fu, but her legs and wrists were more heavily spiked. They had never seen any weapons on her before, but the gauntlets on her wrists had rather long, curved spikes that might have been weapons. The man known as Hachibi no Kyogyu was enormous. His hair curved back somewhat like horns, and his skin was dark. His legs and arms were so large that it was doubtful he could move at all. In his left hand, he appeared to be holding a battering ram in the shape of a bull's skull, and he was dressed in an ancient military uniform that no one had ever seen before. Additionally, the Kyuubi no Yoko was a man who appeared strong despite being thin. He had red eyes with small slits and slightly long crimson hair. His facial hair was sparse, and his nails were long and sharp. He wore a male battle's hakama with black markings all over it. If he was the only one wearing them, it seemed to indicate some sort of prestige. He was holding no weapon, but he had a necklace with a single black claw around his neck. "Whoa, so this is what your human forms are?" asked Naruto, glancing at their Jinchuriki. Sanbi snorted. Yagura decided to speak up at this point, saying, "Oh, don't be so shocked. All demons who have gained a substantial amount of power can gain a human form." "Sorry, Sanbi. Sama, but we were unaware of this." Ribi said, "We would prefer it if you called us by our names. My name is Aburamushi," in a feminine voice. Speaking up, Ichibi said, "My name is Shukaku." Nibi strolled over to embrace her Jinchuriki and said, "My name is Kokonai." Pointing to himself, the Sanbi snorted and said, "Call me Yasei." Bowing curtly, Yanbi said, "My alias is Yamazaru." With a soft voice, Gobi said, "You may call me Suizuki." With a gentle tone, Rokubi said, "My comrades call me Hidoro." "Call me Senio baby," Nanabi exclaimed as she bounded over, beaming broadly. With a wince, the other Biju said, "Even in her human form, her voice is annoying." "You want to repeat that?" Senio growled as he turned to face Yasei, who merely snorted and turned away. Pointing to himself, Hachibi sighed and said, "The name is Kanedzuchi, and don't you forget it." As he stepped forward, Kyuubi sighed and said, "My name is Kitsunji, but for now, you can call each of us sensei." Kitsunji's smile grew wide, and he suddenly resembled a certain snake mistress. "Let the torture begin." Everyone stared at him. Unless Ribi was smiling because of the insane aura around her, then yes, make that all the Biju. All 10 Jinchuriki gulped as similar smiles appeared on the faces of most of the other Biju. The Naruto Retrieval Squad, with 2 tri-pronged kunai poised for launch and her katana on her back, Sora was leaping through the trees. With his Sharingan ready to go, Kakashi trailed behind her. Following closely behind, Yamato recited the entirety of his demon suppression technique. Rin emerged from behind with her medical equipment ready to go. "Any sign, guys?" Sora paused on a branch and surveyed the area, followed by Kakashi, Rin, and Yamato. Kakashi shook his head and said, "No, we looked everywhere, and I sent out my Ninken to try and find him, but it seems like Naruto just disappeared." Sora gave Kakashi a savage look. Based on what Minato had told him, Kakashi took a small step back. "No, I am not losing my brother, do you hear me? I will kick your ass if you so much as suggest that again." Sora was on low Jonin level on her own, but when she got angry, it was unlikely that they could resist her. "Hey, calm down you two," they said to Yamato. "Kakashi, Senpai just says he is not in this region. We will find him soon, don't worry." "Oto, we will soon be a family again," Sora said with a sigh as she got to her feet and bounded into the trees, followed by the other 3. Back at the mountain that night, Haku was already preparing some medicinal herbs when Naruto passed out in front of him. They had been training since this morning. Kyuubi was serious when he said, "Torture." They were all trained by their own Biju, and although each Biju was stronger than the others, they all possessed abilities that made their Jinchuriki rivals on an equal footing. Naruto had fallen off the mountain about 6 times after Kitsunji. Sensei forced him to run laps up and down it using only chakra while he blew up parts of it at random. For several hours, Kanedzuchi had Karabi balance 8 weights on his arms while he shook the ground at random. Karabi had dropped the weights on his feet a few times. Senio had performed mass acupuncture on Fu while humming a song and tickling her in various spots. Fu had been complaining about needles for hours, and she probably won't ever let one close to her again after this. Although it might not seem difficult at first, Hidoro's slime appeared to change density every 5 seconds, forcing Utakata to walk over it. Han was given the task by Suizuki to use his bare hands to warm up several hot rocks before placing them on her back. Roshi was given the task by Yamazaru to hold 2 pieces of coal in his hand and then use fire chakra to fill them both without letting go. Yagura was carrying 5 cinder blocks on his back when Yeisei instructed him to hold his breath underwater. Yugito had been forced to ascend the rock face by Kokonai using just her hands and absolutely no chakra. For 10 hours straight, Shukaku had Gaara perform repeated jumping jacks while applying 3 sets of weight to each arm and leg. Additionally, Aburamushi continued to give Amaru blood, replenishing pills, and treated her like a leech. Overall, it was fucking awful. Haku-chan, did Zabuza ever put you through something like this? Naruto asked, glancing at Haku. As he nestled into Haku's lap, Naruto sighed and said, "Don't worry, I'm sure they had a reason why they did those things to you." Haku shook her head. "No, but he did have me do regular training sessions every day." When the Biju approached them, everyone turned around and said, "We did. We were testing the limits of your abilities, and how much your body can take." "So, now what?" Karabi exclaimed as he leapt to his feet and each Biju produced a metallic orb. The Jinchuriki exchanged glances before shrugging their shoulders and moving toward their individual Biju as Kanazuchi said, "Charge your own chakra into this, it will form into the weapon best suited for you." Each of them grasped their orb and infused it with their own chakra. The orb of Amaru changed into a tiny weapon that could be grasped in the hand. There were 2 curved blades on the side, and a short spike emerged in the middle, directly between her middle and ring fingers. With purple vein-like markings running up the side and the kanji for love etched on the Naginata blade, Gaara's orb changed into a Naginata. When Yugito tested one, the nails grew longer, and his orb changed into a pair of gloves with metal spikes at each fingertip. Yagura changed into a basic bow-staff, but it appeared to have a long, water-filled tube inside. Roshi changed into a pair of armored gloves that reached his shoulders. There were brass knuckles on each fist. Hans was a big fan featuring an Urukama design. A long tube containing 3 water-filled bubbles was given to Utakata. With a spiked chain, Fu attached a fan with blades to a broadsword with 2 blades. A basic black tanto that appeared to arc with lightning energy was given to Karabi. They all looked at their weapons before turning to face Naruto, whose orb was shifting all the time, seemingly unable to shift properly. Looking at the orb, Kitsunji said, "Curious, this should only happen if you have come in contact with a similar material that has synchronized with your chakra." He turned to face Naruto and asked, "Tell me, did you ever come into contact with such a substance by chance?" As he looked up toward the cave where he had discovered aura, Naruto tilted his chin and assumed a contemplative pose. Not that I know of," he said, looking up. "Wait, there was this weird crystal that held aura as a prisoner. When I touched it, it seemed to glow as some sort of vibration ran through it, then it exploded." Kitsunji grinned and said, "Ah, it appears that a leech crystal held young Ms. Aura captive." Naruto turned to Kitsunji and said, "A leech crystal is a unique kind of crystal that can synchronize with a person's chakra." He turned to Aura, who was perplexed, and said, "This means that you and Aura have synchronization between your 2 chakras. It is also unique in that it can synchronize with 2 people rather than just the one that our demonic metals can." "What?" Aura and Naruto yelled in surprise. "Have I stumbled? Your 2 chakras have been synchronized." "So, what does that mean for?" Aura approached Kitsunji, turning to face Naruto, "The 2 of us." Kitsunji began to think. "Well, I honestly don't know. I have rarely ever seen 2 humans synchronize their chakra, and the last time I saw 2 humans synchronize their chakra was when the Raikudo Sennin and his brother fought. Unfortunately, the results were less than favorable." This time, Moka decided to say, "What happened?" "I would rather not say. It is vulgar to even think about it," Kitsunji said, appearing to shiver. "Well," Naruto said, glancing at Kitsunji, "what might happen to us?" Kitsunji sighed and said, "Don't know, you could possibly gain telepathy to each other. You might become dependent on each other's chakra, who knows, I sure as hell don't." "Oh yeah," Naruto growled, yelling at the fox demon, "that makes us feel so much better." Kyuubi turned to face them and said, "Really, because I wasn't trying to, anyway." He then turned to face the cave and said, "Naruto, I'm going to need those crystal shards in order to forge your weapon, so..." Hopped to it. He took hold of Naruto's collar and hurled him in the direction of the cave. I fucking hate you, Kyuubi. He landed in a much deeper water pit inside the cave. Great, and I tried so hard to get out of here the last time. Perfect. Naruto broke through the surface and grabbed for the ledge. He then walked back down the cavern to the chamber where he had discovered Aura. There was a slight red glow surrounding the cavern when he first entered. Naruto looked and saw that the glow was coming from a number of crystal shards in the wall. He swiftly started to remove them by drawing a sealing scroll. Naruto picked it up and examined it. It was glowing from the chakra it must have absorbed from Naruto and Aura. After he had all the shards, he started to leave, but he stopped abruptly when he saw the final shard. This shard was smooth, almost like a gem. He pocketed it carefully and made his way to the cave's entrance. After arriving, he descended the cliff face slowly using his chakra. He dropped to the ground and gave Kitsunji the scroll, saying, "Here are the crystals. What will you do with them now?" After opening the shards and carefully examining them with his claws scraping against the gem's surface, Kitsunji turned to Naruto and said, "It looks like one piece is missing. Are you sure you got them all?" The smooth shard was discovered by Naruto reaching into his pocket. Kitsunji took it from his hands and examined it, saying, "Marvelous. It seems like this gem was practically made for you too." He motioned for Aura to approach, but she did so nervously. "Naruto. Aura. I wish for the two of you to charge your chakra into this gem." Aura raised an eyebrow, asking, "Why? Just testing something," Kitsunji said, shrugging his shoulders. The two then charged chakra into the stone. Initially, nothing happened, but later, the stone started to glow brightly, emitting a variety of light colors from its center. As the gem glowed brilliantly from the two's connecting chakra, everyone watched in awe, which made Kitsunji smile. "Amazing. I have never seen such a phenomenon before," Kitsunji said, grabbing the gem and holding it up while the glow persisted. "Now, as to what I am going to do with these shards, I am going to construct a weapon for Naruto, and by the looks of it, Aura as well," Kitsunji said, glancing at the two. The following day after completing some final training, everyone had fallen asleep, and Aura had chosen to sleep in the tree while Naruto slept beneath it, with Haku nestled against his chest and Moka lying between them. "You guys, rise and shine." Kitsunji was standing in front of them holding something wrapped in cloth when Naruto woke up with a start and drew a kunai, ready to attack. "What is it, Kitsunji?" Naruto moaned as he tucked his kunai away, being cautious not to waken Haku. "I finally finished your weapon and Aura's weapon, and I must say, it is quite a beauty," said Kyuubi rank Biju with a smile. "Really? Grrrnn, okay, hold on." Aura yawned and opened her eyes slightly before flipping onto her feet and jumping off the branch. "So, let's see it. Behold your new weapon, one of only a few weapons forged by a Biju that has been allowed in mortal hands," Kitsunji said with a smile as he lifted the cloth to reveal the object underneath. The weapon, which was a long staff with 3 prongs shaped like a sai blade at one end and a crescent moon shaped blade at the other, was a brilliant red color that left Naruto and Aura in awe. A black grip with grooves to increase gripping power was located in the center. Aura saw that the weapon had multiple grooves on both ends, which made her wonder if they served a functional purpose or were merely ornamental. When Naruto ran out of things to say, he turned to Kitsunji and asked, "What does it do?" Kyuubi grinned and took the grip, setting it in front of Naruto and Aura. "Charge your chakra into it, and find out." After exchanging uncomfortable glances, Naruto and Aura turned to the weapon in front of them and seized it. The pole's interior lit up blue as they started to charge chakra into it. "Naruto, why don't you try it first?" Kitsunji asked, giving Naruto a look. "Just let it flow with you." Naruto studied the weapon. Naruto nodded his head and took a step back, deciding to begin with a basic bow staff technique because, at the time, it seemed to be the simplest. Since he had never done this before, he anticipated some difficulty when performing a simple strike, but instead he discovered that it was like moving an extension of his body. After trying again and experiencing the same feeling, Naruto decided to try a few more katas and ended up performing a number of movements with such fluidity that it seemed as though he was moving with the wind. He went one step further and demonstrated gestures that appeared to be employed by masters. Aura watched in awe. Naruto's movements had a hypnotic grace, and she couldn't help but stare at him without even closing her eyes. Naruto used a thrust to finish his kata, but instead he heard a faint click in the weapon's sai end. A blue chain of chakra connecting it to the staff shot off. Splinters flew everywhere as the sai crashed into a tree in its path. Naruto gaped in disbelief. How could he have done that? Aura was thinking the same thing. Kitsunji opted to clarify, the weapons we gave each of you are naturally synchronized to your specific chakra. The result is that even though you have never used the weapon before, the synchronization between your chakra and the weapon guides you to the correct motions. Aura should be able to do it as well, albeit with slight differences. After exchanging glances, Naruto and Aura turned back to Kitsunji and said, now, you two had better get ready, because for the next 2 weeks, all of you are going to be referring to us as sensei. Kitsunji's smile widened, sending panic shivering through Aura and Naruto's bodies. Oshish. T. After a week from sunrise to sunset, the Jinchuriki, Haku, Moka, and Aura trained. Zabuza trained Haku, Moka, and Aura while the Biju trained their individual Jinchuriki. Kyuubi, on the other hand, taught Aura how to use her and Naruto's new weapon, which they had chosen to call Shesmu. Moka observed from a distance as Naruto, Haku, and Aura practiced together. Baka, you are obviously hungry, but you only accept the young girl's blood. Why not accept the young blonde's blood instead? It's so much more succulent. Because I am not going to take any more blood than he has already lost. He has endured enough, Moka yelled at her inner demon. As she was about to speak, Moka keeled over in agony and exclaimed, Og? Naruto paused mid. Keita and turned to face Moka, who was screaming in agony. Moka! Naruto exclaimed, dropping his weapon, and rushed to join Moka, who was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. As Utakata and Amaru ran over, he saw that Moka's screams had apparently been heard by the others. What is going on? Utakata saw that Moka's body was cracking in places and that the rosario on her neck was splitting in two, releasing uncontrollable amounts of energy. Shit, her body is trying to separate itself. How could this have happened? The only way this could occur is if she had two personalities, and absorbed a portion of demonic Yuki. Amaru said, lowering herself to her knees and performing a diagnostic jutsu, but she did not like the outcome. Both Naruto's and Aura's eyes grew wide. Amaru, is there any way to help her? Naruto asked, glancing at her. Yes, it would require some of her natural body, an untainted sample of the same type of Yuki that is doing this to her, and we need to build up a secondary body, Amaru said, glancing at Naruto as Moka's skin continued to crack. Naruto then slid his wrist with a kunai. Then what the fuck are we waiting for? While Utakata watched over Moka's rosario, Amaru nodded and pricked her finger. We have 30 seconds before her body completely breaks down, she said. Amaru took a number of different elixirs and started combining Naruto and Moka's blood. Amaru started to stir the mixture more quickly, saying, 15 seconds and counting. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, Amaru started making hand signals. 5, when she said, Suseki Soka no Hata, Genesis creation of body. Amaru charged chakra into her palms. 4, as the blood transformed into a humanoid shape, it glowed whitely. 3, when Utakata attempted to remove the rosario without success, Naruto swiftly snatched it and removed it. 2, the rosario broke in two, and Naruto pushed each fragment into one of the two bodies. 1, as they passed through the two new bodies, the two fragments of the rosario disintegrated and turned into dust. It was a near miss, Naruto sighed as he leaned back. Naruto glanced at the two figures on the ground before fainting from a slight nosebleed. So, perfect, Haku said, focusing on the newly formed body while glancing at the two figures, a little drool trickling down her cheeks. Aura swiftly covered her eyes, which were twitching. Because a silver-haired Moka with pale skin and D-cup breasts was lying next to a pink-haired Moka with C-cup breasts who was fully clothed. When the silver-haired Moka's eyes opened and revealed that they were red, the two Mokas turned to face one another, which made the pink-haired Moka eep and turn away. Confused, the silver-haired Moka looked down and exclaimed, what the hell? After glancing around, she abruptly picked up an object and covered herself with it. Would someone please tell me where my clothes are? As she tried to cover herself with Naruto's body, she heard a muffled whimper close to her chest. Glancing down, she saw that she had pushed him between her breasts. She shouted, fucking pervert, and threw Naruto. When Naruto hit the ground, a tiny bump appeared on his head. That evening the silver-haired Moka was wearing a kimono that Suizuki had kindly lent her, at least until she could afford a better outfit. They had succeeded in getting her some clothes. So, would one of you mind telling me what happened? Naruto asked, glancing at the two Mokas. Well, this here, said the pink-haired Moka, gesturing to the Moka seated beside her. Is my inner self, but, she said, glancing at the red-eyed beauty. How is it she became solid? Apparently, when you drank Naruto's blood, It contained enough remaining Yuki to start separating your two personalities, Amaru said. This is unusual because no one usually survives ingesting even a small piece of demonic Yuki, but thanks to your skills, you managed to survive the process. As for her, I created a body for her using a small amount of both your and Naruto's blood. Haku chimed in, well, what are we going to call her? I mean, it will get really confusing if we just keep calling her Moka. After giving it some thought, Naruto snapped his fingers and said, what about Bara? Everybody turned to face Naruto, who shrugged his shoulders and said, hey, that was the first thing that came to mind. The now named Bara grinned a little as Moka glomped her, and the silver-haired woman stroked her chin and said, well, it does have a nice ring to it, I approve. At last, I have a sister of full blood. Bara twitched a little as Moka nuzzled into her cheek. Grrrn was the sound everyone made as they turned to face Haku and then Naruto, both of them sporting sheepish expressions. I get a chance to touch those. Haku smiled as she saw this. She turned to face Naruto and said, Naruto-kun, why don't you let the two of them have a nice meal? I've been feeding Moka for the past few days, so I'm a little low on blood. Would you please do that, darling? She presented Naruto with a pair of puppy dog eyes, causing him to wilt under the strain. With a sigh, he took off the garment around his neck and said, go on. Naruto was unable to finish because Moka and Bara leapt up and bit his neck, consuming his blood. Kapu.chu. As Naruto shouted to the sky, the two vampires let out a squeal. Afterwards, while Naruto was off to the side, tending to his neck, Moka and Bara were sitting there grinning broadly. The Biju was standing in front of them when Kyuubi stepped forward and said, all right, so we trained you all in your weapons and some other skills for the last week. For the next 3 weeks, you will have to train in an area we send you to. He turned to face the girls in Zabuza and said, since technically Nasuto is in charge of you, you 5 will go along with him, but you are not permitted to help with his training in any way, shape, or form. As the Jinchuriki moved to stand next to their respective Biju, the 4 girls and 1 missing nin nodded their heads, and Kyuubi let his 9 tails follow them. The Biju all sealed with one hand, saying, Yuki Senku, and in a sudden burst of light, the Biju and their respective hosts vanished. The Aim no Kuni border on the edge of Aim no Kuni, Sora, Kakashi, Yamato, and in landed. I will check south and west, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Sora said, turning to Kakashi. Check the North District. She then turned to Yamato and said, go develop a base of operations, in 3 hours send out a signal. Sora then turned to Rin and said, you check out the East District. In an instant, there were 10 Soras where there had previously been just 1. Fan out and find our Oto-Oto. As the other 3 Jonin and the clones dispersed, Sora surveyed the city and said, Oto-Oto, we'll find you. After searching Aim no Kuni for a week, Sora and her team eventually arrived in the capital city, which was ruled by Salamander Hanzo. The city itself was rather large. In fact, it was larger than 3 secret villages that together were the size of Konoha. In addition, no summoned beast could ever reach the height of the buildings. Fortunately, her father had assisted the people of Aim in quelling a rebellion by a group of revolutionaries approximately 7 years prior. The leader, an orange man with spiky hair, was killed, but the other 2 escaped. As she spoke on her communicator, Sora strolled down a busy street and said, okay, this sector so far is clear. I can see no sign of Naruto anywhere. Got it, Sora, head over to the rendezvous point. We need to relay the information to the others, was said over the comm link. Roger, I'll see you there, Kakashi, Sora retorted. Damn, this is going to be harder than I thought. Sora sighed as she shut off the communicator. Then she turned around and bumped into someone, sending a few documents flying. A dark-haired man, probably a civilian, picked up his papers and nodded his head as Sora got up and helped him up, saying, sorry about that, are you alright? He showed Sora one of the documents, which was an artist's rendition of what looked to be a wanted poster, and said, I am fine, I just have to get these documents put up. What is this? She went over the description. As a local criminal for the past 3 months, Vigilante is Aim's shadow wanted alive or dead. Do not engage with him and call for immediate assistance if you come into contact with him. The man stood up and sighed as Sora read the bounty and her eyes widened. Wow, that is a lot of zeros. Yes, he has been lowering crime in Aim for a while and attacking local gang areas. Hanzo Sama has placed a bounty on his head for his capture, alive or dead, because the way he approaches it frightens the public. The man left and proceeded to hang the posters, but Sora glanced at the one he had given her. 100 million Ryo huh, damn. That would set me up for life, she sighed and folded the poster, putting it in her back pocket. But, that's not what I am here for. She started to walk down the street, heading for the hotel. As she left, a dark figure on the wall who looked exactly like the person on the poster snorted and vanished in a shunshin, leaving no sign that he had ever been there. Afterwards, at the hotel sitting around a table with a map of the city they were in, Sora, Kakashi, Yamato, and Rin said, "All right, we have looked over our districts multiple times and have not been able to locate any evidence of Naruto anywhere to date. It is reasonable to presume that he is not in a megacure, in my opinion." Yamato breathed a sigh of relief as he, "Man, this sucks. We have been looking for him for 2 weeks, and we have sent several tracking teams to find him. Naruto really does not want to be found, that's for sure." "Damn it." Sora slammed her fist against the table. "I just returned home, and I'm not going to lose my brother." Rin gave Sora a shoulder pat. The med.nin Kunoichi sighed as she looked at the floor and saw a folded piece of paper there. "And we will find him, just be patient." Sora walked out of her chair angrily and left the room. As she unfolded the paper, Yamato and Kakashi leaned over. It was a wanted poster for a vigilante in AIM. "You think it could," Yamato said, turning to face Kakashi. Kakashi gave a headshake. The copy.nin sat down with his feet up and said, "No, this person has been in AIM for the past couple months. Naruto has been in Konoha since then. We will make one more run through the city in the morning, then we will move on." "Unknown place, oh yeah, this feels so nice." Haku groaned with pleasure as she put her hands behind her head. "This is the life. I am so glad we found this place." Gaara, Moka, Ora, and Haku all dipped themselves in the hot springs. Moka nodded. In some way, the separation between her and Gaara eliminated their water sensitivity, allowing them to experience hot springs for the first time in their lives. The other girls laughed as Ora smirked and said, "Man, there weren't any of these back in my day." "What? Back in your day? Do you realize how old that makes you sound?" Haku laughed. As Ora used her Mangekyo Sharingan, she growled at Haku, saying, "Watch it, girly. I can send you through a vortex of doom with a single eye." Haku laughed. "Oh, that's not what Naruto-kun told me. He told me that when you sued your Kamui technique, you were shocked when Moka came out." As she turned away, blushing in embarrassment, Ora said, "Shut up." The other girls laughed at Ora's bad luck. Moka stopped laughing and turned to face Haku. "So, what do you like so much about Naruto-kun, Haku?" "Well, when I first met Naruto, I admired his determination and his kind heart," Haku said with a smile as he glanced at Moka. "The following day, we met up at the same location and made the decision to train together. He quickly recognized me as the hunter.nin who had aided Zabuza, Sama. I taught him some basic taijutsu and chakra control, and he taught me how to think of strategies on the spot. We had a picnic with some of the fish he caught after our training. We discussed our lives, but Naruto seemed to be very close to his early years. After some persuasion, I was able to get him to tell me. I can't recall ever crying so much in my life. His childhood was nothing short of a living hell." Haku took a deep breath and went on, "After that, we kept getting closer and closer until the day right before we were meant to fight on the bridge. I told him that I would talk to Zabuza Sama before making a decision, and he pleaded with me to accompany him to Konoha, even offering to try to get him there." "And what?" Gaara asked, leaning closer. Haku's eyes were beaming as she gazed at Gaara. "When we arrived at the bridge, Naruto-kun wasn't there. They attacked us without hesitation. I didn't have time to react before I was pinned down by multiple ninkin and saw their sensei running towards us with a ball of lightning in his hand." Zabuza. Sama agreed without a second thought. He had been trying for years to find a place where we could settle down, where I wouldn't have to run everywhere. Haku looked down. Haku swallowed as she felt her body start to tremble at the memory. "The last thing I saw was Naruto-kun running towards us, pain, horror, and sadness, all in his eyes." Zabuza. Sama jumped in front of me, but he thrust the strike right through both our hearts. Haku started whimpering, and Moka, Gaara, and surprisingly, Ora, started to cry a little. Moka swam beside Haku and gave her a tender hug, saying, "It's okay, Haku-chan. Let it all out." Haku started to cry and sob as she held onto Moka, finally letting all of her sorrow out. The Hinata, after being discharged from the hospital a week ago, the young Hyuga heiress was taken home to complete her recuperation. Initially, she was supposed to be taken to the house her father had arranged for her once he gave Kurenai complete control of her, but instead, she was taken directly to the Hyuga compound. She considered asking why she was here, but she changed her mind after considering the possibility that it might not be a good idea, particularly with her father involved. She had been taken to her former room, where everything had been restored, a proper bath had been made, and even some of her favorite foods had been prepared. She had always been lavished with attention and some of the finest furniture, something she knew her father would never do unless he had a specific request. Just a few minutes ago, Hinata had been called to her father's office, and as she stood in front of it, the door opened and she was called inside, where her father sat at his desk. Haishi glanced up at the chair in front of the desk and said, "Ah, Hinata, please, sit down." Hinata approached the chair slowly and settled herself gently in the tastefully decorated seat. "Hinata, do you know why you're here?" Haishi asked, glancing at her. "Is this really what I have reduced my child to?" Haishi winced as Hinata instantly tensed up. Hinata started to shake when she replied, "Anyo, you, heard of M.My defeat at T. The hands of Neji, and, UW. Wish to remove my street status as heiress. Now what gave you that idea?" asked Haishi, shaking his head. As she responded, Hinata cast a downward glance. Because I are. Remember hearing Y.us. Say to Kurenai.san th. That, if I died it would not matter, and T. That Hanabi deserves the tile of heiress. Yes, I did indeed say that, but no, I have no intention of removing you from your heiress status. Hinata's eyes widened as she looked at her father, then narrowed as she reached for her kunai pouch. Haishi flinched. He did say those words, but hearing them and saying them were two completely different perspectives. "What have you done with my father, and who are you?" Haishi's eye twitched. "Hinata, what are you? Sching. Hinata was staring into his narrow eyes as Haishi hardly had time to block his kunai with the one he always kept under his desk. "Where is my father? I know him. He would never turn down a chance like this or be this nice." Hinata tried to drive her kunai into the imposter by applying more pressure to her blade. "Hinata, I am not an imposter. What can I do to convince you otherwise?" Haishi asked, grabbing Hinata's wrist. "Is this really what I have done to her? Have I been so cold that my kindness would be alien to her? Get off me, imposter!" Hinata yanked her wrist free of Haishi's hold. The guards on the opposite side of the wall heard Hinata's shout, kicked it down, and assumed a Juukan stance. When Hinata pushed past the guards and ran to the exit, they turned to face Haishi and inquired what just happened. As he put his kunai away, Haishi looked down and said, "Nothing that I did not bring upon myself." Alongside Sora left the hotel and went outside. She was unsure of why, but she had a strange feeling that something was missing in this town, and no matter how hard she searched, she was unable to locate the source of that feeling. "Where are you, Uto?" Sora sighed. She had been looking forward to meeting her brother, fiancé, and had been preparing day and night for the day they could finally be together. However, she now questioned whether all of her years of planning, studying, and so forth would ultimately be worthwhile. With determination in her eyes, Sora inhaled deeply and said, "Once we explain everything, he will understand." She went on, gurgle, but stopped when she heard her stomach's telltale rumbling. "Oh boy, all this searching has gotten me hungry." "Well," she said, looking at the opening of several late-night restaurants. "I guess a single bite won't hurt." A figure crawling across the wall of one of the buildings followed Sora as she approached the first stand. At Konoha, the village's nighttime lights came on as the sun went down, and the Hokage Tower was ablaze with lights as shinobi and civilians entered and exited, asking for things like training offers for Naruto or potential marriage contracts with his son and daughter. Minato. However, two people weren't at all pleased with Minato. Grabbing Minato by the jacket, Jiraiya slammed his fist against the desk and said, "You bastard, do you even know what you did?" As though it were the most straightforward thing in the world, Minato turned to face his sensei and said, "Jiraiya. Sensei, all I did was teach Sora mine and Kushina's techniques, while Naruto learned to control the Kyuubi's chakra. You moron. What about Naruto's emotional development? Are you aware of the emotional and physical needs a child would have to develop normally? I might add that you essentially ensured Naruto would never be able to meet these needs." Minato turned to face Senju Tsunade, the slug Sannin. When she and Jiraiya learned of what had transpired, how Minato, Kushina, and Sora were still alive, and how they had essentially abandoned Naruto during his entire childhood, they immediately rushed into Konoha. However, neither of them had given Minato a good time. Now, Jiraiya and Tsunade, don't you feel that you are treating Minato-kun a bit harshly? Besides, weren't you both meant to look after Naruto? Tsunade practically thrust her finger in Kushina's face while sneering at her, saying, "Don't you think we tried? But the damn civilian council forbid us from even seeing Naruto. They claimed that Naruto was unworthy of love." Jiraiya slammed his fist into the desk as Minato said, "Tsunade, Jiraiya, I assure, we had everything under control." As they turned to leave, Jiraiya and Tsunade slammed the door behind them. Tell that to your son, if you even have the right to call him that. Alongside Sora. Ah, that was tasty. Now, what am I going to do now? Sora said, finishing her meal and nearly emptying the restaurant in one sitting. As she passed an alley, Sora said, help, and looked around at a scene that astounded and repulsed her. Don't worry bitch, this is going to feel really good. The biggest man placed his member in front of her entrance as three missing nin stripped a woman of her clothing, reducing her to nothing but her bra and the frayed remnants of her outer garments. He pulled his hips back, preparing to insert his member inside her. Hi, asshole. The man flew back towards a number of trash cans after stopping and looking up to see a foot before it crashed into his face. Sora looked at the frightened woman and said, run. She turned to face the other two missing nins and gave them both a roundhouse kick to the face, making them release the woman. Without wasting any time, the woman left and went into the streets. It's scum like you three that give us shinobi a bad name, Sora said, turning to face the three men. You bitch, you took our amusement for tonight, the three men growled at Sora as they stood up. I suppose you will have to fill in that role, one of them grinned. Now, won't you? Sora assumed a fighting stance as the men started to stalk her. Sora reached for a kunai, but three shuriken crashed into the ground between them, saying, you won't live long enough to try it. All of them looked up, and when they saw who it was, their eyes widened. A man in a full black bodysuit with a ski mask over his eyes was twirling a set of shuriken on the wall. He threw the shuriken at the three missing nin, instantly killing them. His eyes narrowed as he turned to face Sora. You should leave, Konoha scum. The man snapped his fingers and vanished through Shunshin. Those eyes, could it be? Sora stared at the man's position, wondering how it could be. He looked exactly like the man on one of the posters, but he gave her the same hateful look that Uto gave her when he found out she was his sister. But how? This man had been a problem here for months. Could it be Naruto? It doesn't matter how it is possible. All that matters is that Naruto might be in this village. We can't leave yet, she said as she turned to the street and ran towards the hotel. Unbelieving what Sora had just said, Kakashi looked at her and asked, are you sure? Do you have complete confidence that Naruto is in aim? Yes, there was no mistaking the look he gave me, Sora said, nodding her head. When he discovered that I was his sister, he gave me the exact same expression. This doesn't make sense, Rin said, pressing her palm to her forehead. Naruto has been in Konoha the whole time this vigilante has been in aim. It's just not possible for Naruto to be this vigilante. Whether it is possible or not, the fact remains that my brother must be here in aim, Sora yelled, slamming her hands on the table. He will perish if we don't locate him before Hanzo's army does. Now, let's just calm down, Yamato said, attempting to defuse the impending explosion. We must apprehend Naruto and return him to Konoha if he is present in this village so that Yondaime Sama can fully explain his actions. Got it. Kakashi sighed and sat down, looking up again. All right, let's do a thorough sweep of the city. Yamato. Use your Mokaton sensory to try to get that sonar you've been working on to work properly. Rin. Question everyone who has interacted with this so-called vigilante. Sora. Use as many cage bunshin as you can to track him. Pakun and my other ninja hounds will be sent out to find his scent. After giving each other a nod, they went outside. At least 30 cage bunshin were called forth by Sora, and they immediately began to fly around the city in search of anything that might point them in the direction of her brother. Rin tried to get some intel by going to some of the local meeting places. Yamato attempted, but failed miserably, to align his chakra with the wood that held the city together. Kakashi called forth all of his hounds and dispatched them as he made his way to the Omegakure leader's headquarters. No Hanzo, Sanshuo with Bara and Moka was enjoying a cup of freshly squeezed tomato juice while she nibbled on a cookie and looked through a magazine full of different styles and kunoichi clothing. With a large plate of sweets at her side and several cups of tomato juice at Moka's, the two were lying down and enjoying the sun's rays as they passed over them. Moka was going to resume drinking her tomato juice when she noticed Bara snatching a big piece of cake and shoveling it into her mouth. Bara, why are you consuming so many sweets? Moka asked. With her mouth still full, Bara turned to Moka and said, because I am hungry. She swallowed the cake and went on, you try being stuck inside someone for over 10 years without being able to stretch your legs, or eat without having to siphon off the one you are sealed into. She took a long stick of dango and said, besides, this stuff tastes good. She ate one of the dango and went on, I wonder why too. Sama only let us drink blood packets when this stuff is around, belch. Pardon me, she said, blushing and covering her mouth. Moka perspired, so much for the elite vampire personality. Gaara turned the page of her magazine and shrugged her shoulders. She turned to face Moka, who was looking down with a dejected expression on her face, and said, "Hey, people in this world don't even know about vampires. Besides, I have wanted to let loose from that tradition for years. Do you think we'll ever make it home, Gaara?" With a sigh, Gaara turned over and gazed up at the sky. "Besides, I kind of like it here, so who knows?" When her younger half-sister was mentioned, Moka flinched and said, "No idiotic monsters challenging us. Kokoa isn't trying to get me to fight her anymore." Naruto.kun and Gaara stopped when she realized what she had just said, "Oh crap," and turned to face Moka, who was smiling mischievously. Thus, when did the pervert turn into Naruto.kun? Gaara sat up and started making funny gestures with her arms. Moka couldn't help but agree, saying, "It isn't anything like that, his blood is just so tasty." Naruto's blood tasted sweet, but it also had a strange spice that made her shiver. "It is more than that, Gaara. If it was just his blood you would address him as San, not Kun." Gaara looked at Moka, who shrugged her shoulders and said, "What, you and I are essentially the same person, it is only logical that I would know your personality." Moka dismissed those thoughts and went on with her interrogation. A storm cloud hung over Gaara as she turned away, blushing, and said, "Well, I admit he could possibly be a good mate." She sighed, "But he already has that Haku girl, and unless I kill her, I am not going to be embracing him as more than a friend, or my breakfast." "So that's how it is," said the ice user, who was watching them without their knowledge and smiling broadly. Moka rose and approached Gaara, saying, There, I am sure Naruto.kun will." As Gaara gazed at her, Moka blushed. "Yay, this just keeps getting better," Haku said, his smile widening in the darkness. With a mischievous smile, Gaara said to her partner, "So, Naruto.kun, would you like to explain that one?" When Gaara fell on Moka, she flushed. "Oh Kami, please help me." At Konoha, Tenten was sitting by the side of the training grounds where she and her team, if that can even be called that anymore, practiced. Neji had been more hostile and hateful since the end of the Chunin exam preliminary exams, acting as though everyone was an enemy that needed to be killed. She was scared to spar with him because he would always attack with the intention of killing her, which is why she currently had a broken arm. Neji had used an overpowered Juukan strike on her arm, shattering some of the nerves and bone. She might never be a shinobi again, but she was in the same situation as Lee. With a sigh, she brought her knees to her chest and asked, "What should I do now?" Since she would never be permitted to go on another mission unless Tsunade herself agreed to heal her, she started to consider where her abilities could be put to use. Excuse me," Tenten said, looking up to discover Lee standing there, surprisingly, even though he was using crutches and was dressed in a hospital uniform. "Do you mind if I sit here, Tenten?" Despite Tenten's surprise at Lee's question, he smiled and said, "I don't mind at all." Lee's smile was gentle and not his famous grin. The two blushed at the intimate contact and sat there for the rest of the day. "Thank you, Tenten." He lowered himself gently and nearly fell over, but Tenten caught him and helped lower him to the ground. In other places, it just doesn't seem possible. Her reserves are small, and she has no special abilities that would give her an edge. So why is it the curse mark adapted to her son quickly? Orochimaru asked himself as he examined Sakura Haruno's DNA, trying to understand how she was able to use the curse mark so quickly. He recalled his previous experiments and pondered how they survived the curse marks, wondering what it was about them that allowed them to survive. What was it that made them superior? Orochimaru took out the files containing the names of the people who had received the curse seal. What was it about Kidomaru, Jirobo, Kimimaro, Sakin and Yukon, Tayuya, and his daughter Anko that made them able to withstand the curse seal so well? The ones he had placed on others had been diluted with the applicant's chakra, which in some way made them more resilient to the process but diminished the strength of the curse seal. He looked at the statistics he had taken of Sakura and examined the 7 who had managed to escape the curse seals. Sakura Haruno ranking by class, top Kunoichi. Genin is the rank. Team, Hitaki Kakashi's Unit 7, with Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke as teammates. Notable abilities. Proficient in geography, history, shinobi etiquette, and other subjects that scholars would be familiar with. Also exhibits advanced chakra control. She was just an ordinary kunoichi with some knowledge and sophisticated chakra control. She had no special bloodline or techniques. In the hopes of discovering something similar, he looked through the other people's files multiple times, but he was unable to discover anything that they all had in common other than the fact that they all possessed advanced control over either chakra or specific body parts. Hold on a minute. Orochimaru reviewed through the files again. Kidomaru had advanced control over his chakra and the special secretions in his body, allowing him to separate enzymes in his body and mix them to form complex compounds. Jirobo had excellent control over his chakra and metabolism. He almost never got tired thanks to chakra leaching ability. A bonus was that he could eat almost anything, and in a few seconds he could have a massive increase in chakra. Saken and Yukon could mesh their flesh together and use each other's chakra. There was now a way this was accomplished through a mere Keke Genkai. It must have needed amazing control to allow their chakra networks to commingle with each other. Tayuya could cast illusions using only sound, a difficult process that only 2 individuals in his whole army could accomplish. And Kimimaro, his Shikatsumiku was nothing to sneeze at, as it allowed him to pull his bones straight out of his body without damaging his internal organs. But how? Perhaps he could control his organ position. Lastly, his daughter Enko had managed to survive the curse seal, and her control over her chakra was astounding, being able to summon large snakes with only a little chakra, all because of her advanced control. One conclusion can be drawn from all of these. The curse mark necessitated some degree of control over the body or the chakra, but it couldn't be that easy, could it? Those who had died from the curse mark, on the other hand, had enormous reserves but terrible chakra control. With only one question in mind, the snake Sanin stood and strode towards his laboratories as a sick smile contorted Orochimaru's features. I suppose we will have to test this theory. Who would be the fortunate pawn for him, after 2 days? Aim. They had spent 2 days looking for this vigilante non-stop, but tracking him down was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. If you wanted to find him, he made sure you couldn't. Sora moaned as she sat down on the ledge of one of the buildings. She swung her legs over the edge and thought, this vigilante protects people, so he will likely be in an area where lots of crime occurs. Her eyes widened as she snapped her head and looked over towards the dilapidated AIM district. Where the hell is he? Where are you, Oto? She asked, crossing her legs and surveying the city. Her mother and father had told her that the Kiroi AIM district was teeming with thieves, rapists, and other criminals, making it the ideal location for the AIM's shadow to hide and carry out his work. She straightened up, jumped out of the building, and started to hop across the roofs in the direction of the district. In the meantime, an obese man dressed in traditional cook's clothes stood at the counter of one of the few eateries in the Kiroi AIM district, wiping the counter while oblivious to the surroundings. When he heard the doorbell ring, he looked up and said, "Welcome to SCHING. 3 dubious looking figures were smiling at him as he held his arms up with a sword at his throat. With a snort and a shrug, the person with the blade at his throat said, "Open it, and maybe we will let you live." Fearing for his life, the man hurried to the register and started unloading the cash. He was halfway through when he was ready to give it to the man when a kunai sliced his wrist, causing him to drop the bag. A black masked figure wearing a full-body stealth suit was what they all saw when they turned toward the kunai. The shadow of the AIM. Shit, run. The leader's eyes widened. They didn't even bother to pick up the money before they fled out the door. After putting his kunai pouch away, the shadowed figure turned to face the man and said, "Hey, you okay?" As AIM's shadow retrieved the money bag and put it back on the counter, the man nodded his head and said, "Here you go. Now if you'll excuse me, I have some evils to kill." He then bounded out of the store after the criminals. When he saw Uzumaki Namikaze Sora standing on the nearby building, he narrowed his eyes and scurried out of the alleyway, ran up the side of the building, and leapt to the roof of the closest building. He had only been outside for 2 feet before he had to dodge a hail of kunai. "You aren't getting away," Sora said, drawing a pair of kunai and leaping after the man. Sora was right behind the man as he ran through alleys and over the buildings, then he ran up a wall and flipped over the edge, but not before he executed a jutsu, futon. Daitopa. As the man fled, a pressure barrier of wind rushed in Sora's direction. Using her strength from years of training, Sora pulled herself back up and looked in the direction the man had gone, seeing him jump onto the roof of another building. She barely made it out of the way as she twisted in the air, slamming into the wall but managing to grab onto a ledge before she fell to her death. She was about to follow him when she caught a glimpse of another figure running after the man she was pursuing. Thinking, "Shit, I better catch him soon," she quickly accelerated and made her way to the 2 shadowed figures. Before he was slammed into the wall and pierced through the heart, the figure Sora had been chasing turned around and smiled, saying, "Good. I think I lost her." He then turned around and leapt over the edge, saying, "Now to avenge you, my friends." When Sora leapt over the edge, she saw the other figure impale the man she was pursuing on a long metal rod. The voice of the shadowed figure said, "AIM's shadow, you have been found guilty on multiple accounts of murder. Your punishment is..." "Hold on." The man raised an eyebrow and sighed as he turned to face Sora and said, "I just need to see something, please." Sora nodded and approached the man, reaching up for his mask and yanking it off. Very well, do it quick, or you will share his fate. Do not try to pull off anything funny. She recognized him right away from one of her father's story albums because he had light blue eyes with a brown tint and spiky orange hair. Yahiko was his name. Damn bitch. I hope you and your wretched father share the same fate they bestowed upon my friends. A slow and agonizing death. Yahiko glared at Sora, his head toppling over as the light went out of his eyes. Well, better bring his body to Hanzo. Sama, Kami knows he will want to get rid of him himself. The man sighed and tore out the metal rod, then grabbed the body and fled, leaving Sora to think alone. She sighed and turned to face the street, saying, I guess it wasn't Naruto. Well, guess we need to head back out. She was on the verge of jumping off the building. Suck on this crack. When she heard the sounds of fighting, she turned her head, ran toward the area where the fighting was occurring, and peered into the alleyway. Standing over the battered and bruised bodies of 7 thugs was a man in a black outfit with a blank black hunter.nin mask on. He grabbed one by the front of the shirt and was about to strike him in the face. Hey! The figure paused, raised his head, and then bounded out of the alley. After giving herself a forehead slap and saying, Great, not again, Sora leapt from the roof and chased after the man, who was making his way to the congested AIM district. Sora ran up a wall towards the figure and threw a kunai, which exploded to form a net, and the man slid out of the alleyway right in the middle of traffic, jumping onto a light post and a cart that was going down a set of rails. 2 kunai were drawn out by the figure and thrown, detonating into a hail of senbon. After avoiding the senbon, Sora saw the man jump onto a nearby roof and say, You can't escape me. She chased after the man as they leapt over buildings, running up the lamp post. When he saw Sora following him, the man turned around and swore, saying, I have to get her off my tail. He skidded to a stop when he realized there were no buildings he could jump across, meaning he was stuck. He flinched as something wet struck the top of his head, and when he looked up, he saw that the storm clouds were building and that it was starting to rain. 10 feet behind him, Sora sighed and said, Look man, you can't change the world like this, even though I appreciate your intentions of cleaning up crime. As Sora continued to speak, the figure turned to face her and said, I can't believe it, she is lecturing me. The man looked at Sora. So, I am going to give you this one chance to just walk away, and stop this vigilante nonsense. With a snort, the man extracted a pair of sai from his back pouch. With a faint smile on her face, Sora snorted and said, Look, believe me when I say that you don't want to do this. Ah. Sora used a kunai to deflect the blade as the man lunged at her and pushed the sai forward. He ran back at Sora and started to swing the sai at her, but she kept blocking it with kunai. Wow, not a bad shot, for an amateur. Sora kicked him in the chest, sending him back a few feet before he backflipped. Hey, have you ever done this before, or did you see this in a movie and wanted to see how well you would do? Sora asked, noticing that the man's breathing had increased. If that's the case, then give up. Angry novices shouldn't fight a hardened shinobi, she said, ducking under one of his blows. Oh no. With the intention of stabbing her, he thrust his sai backwards, but the blade was caught as he was swung over Sora's shoulders and flung to the opposite side of the building's roof. As Sora ran toward him, the man looked up, leapt back onto his feet, and stopped Sora's incoming blow. When the man thrust his sai forward, Sora threw a kunai in the air and said, You lose sight of everything, before she disappeared in a golden flash. You know the funny thing about anger, she said, ducking under one of his blows. If you let it consume you, she said. When Sora slammed her foot into the back of his head, shattering the strap that held his mask on, the man was so stunned that the only thing he could hear was the rush of air. As the man started to turn his head, Sora smiled and watched the mask fly off, but her eyes widened when she saw the man's face. His face has 6 whisker arcs, blue eyes, and tanned skin. Naruto. As the rain battered his form, Naruto skidded across the rooftops, his black outfit darkening even more as the storm soaked it deeper. She ran to him and grabbed his shoulders, saying, Oto-Uto-kun, Kami, are you alright? Sora could only stare in disbelief that her Oto-Uto had been there the entire time. With a groan, Naruto opened his eyes and slammed his fist into Sora's face. She staggered back, and he leapt to his feet, kicking her in the chest. She flew back and slammed into a metal vent, pushing it off its foundation and causing a dent. Pointing at her, Naruto sneered in disgust and said, You know that you are so fucking smug? He grabbed his arm and ripped off the sleeves of his suit, saying, You think you are so powerful, so high and mighty, that you can just lecture everybody you come across, belittle them further. He then tore off the sleeve on the other arm, saying, as if they could not possibly survive without the great and powerful Uzumaki Namikaze Sora to guide them through their problems. He then reached into his mouth, tore out a tooth, and threw it at Sora, saying, "You have a big fucking newsflash for you, Sora. Without anyone, I got along just fine." Sora got to her feet and yelled, "Oh, and this counts as just fine? You're going off dressed like a village criminal," she said, gesturing to him. "Putting yourself in danger against odds you have never faced," she said, gesturing to the streets. "Risking the safety of our family," she said, standing erect and placing both hands to her chest. "Come on, what the hell are you thinking?" she yelled, letting her arms drop and swinging them around. As he started to circle the roof, Naruto spat at her, saying, "Don't you dare lecture me, bitch. Your mother and father, cannot abandon me for the rest of my life, favoring one child while letting the other suffer, then returning when he is no longer in need of them and expecting him to embrace them like a naive fool." Following Naruto's circling pattern, Sora moved forward and said, "Hey, I was training to be a better kunoichi, a better wife, for you." With tears in her eyes, she threw down her arms and yelled, "Why do you hate me for that?" With a deep fist-shaped dent from smashing his fist into a metal sheet, Naruto exclaimed, "And who the fuck said I ever wanted us to be married? I'm not going to betray the person I already love." He scoffed and pointed at her, saying, "I am better off on my own and calling my own shots, so get used to it. As for that kunoichi bullshit, you could have become just as strong if you lived in Konoha. All you and your damn parents have done is make excuses." Sora's heart broke when she saw her brother treat her with such contempt, and she gritted her teeth and yelled, "You're not ready. You are impatient, you have a short fuse, and most importantly, I'm better than you," she said, holding up her fingers. "Ha ha ha ha. Oh, you know something, big sister?" Naruto grinned and laughed, snatching something with his hand over his arm as a cloud of smoke appeared. "I have to disagree with you on that on." He yanked forward, revealing Shesmu. Shaking her head, Sora said, "Please, don't do this, Oto." With a tighter grip on his weapon, Naruto declared, "I am done taking orders." Grabbing the hilts of her two katanas, Sora shook her head, scowled, and slid them out of their sheaths before lowering herself into her mother's genjutsu stance. Neither of them moved as they gazed at one another. Sora swung her two katanas in unison with Naruto snarling and shouting as he charged forward. Both of the approaching katanas were swung downward and were blocked by Naruto. Sparks flew as the two weapons collided. With the intention of surprising Naruto, Sora took one of the katanas and swung it under. After spinning Shesmu and blocking the incoming blow, Naruto threw Sora's other arm aside and kicked her, causing her to barely block it with her arm. Her arm was skinned by the blow, and she hissed in agony. "Is this the best the kunoichi trained by the two best of Konoha's shinobi can do?" snorted Naruto as he started to spin Shesmu around. "You can't hit me even after 12 years of training? The deceased come last." He tried to impale Sora as he charged forward, wielding Shesmu like a spear. The three-pronged staff was about to impale Sora when she used her katana, but she was pushed back a few feet by the charging force behind Naruto's attack. The kunoichi thought she would have to block a blow from above when Naruto abruptly stepped back and flipped in the air over Sora. Instead, she watched in disbelief as Shesmu abruptly segmented itself and started to wrap around her. As the rest of his staff started to circle and wrap around Sora, Naruto landed on his feet, holding the end of Shesemu's hilt. Sora used the edge of her blade to prevent the long chain from encircling her after removing one of her katana from Shesemu's tip. Metal ground against metal, sparks flying, and Sora grunting as it became harder and harder to maintain her position. Suddenly, her katana cracked and broke in two, allowing the chain to encircle her. She swore and sent chakra into her legs, narrowly escaping the long chain's trap. As Shesmu prepared to attack, Naruto snapped his wrist, forcing it to transform back into its staff form. With her snapped hilt raised, Sora growled, "Ka-chan gave this to me." She charged at Naruto after tossing the hilt to the ground. The two continued to trade blows as the clanging of metal reverberated throughout the room as Naruto swung Shesmu and repelled her attacks. Naruto swung Shesmu at Sora's side after ducking under one of her swipes. Sora swung her katana down at Naruto after leaping into the air. Clang! The force of their two weapons colliding caused sparks to fly everywhere. Naruto hissed as Sora gained more footing than he did, and the two grunted as they started to press their weapons against each other in an attempt to gain the upper hand. Sora grinned and said, "Look, Oto, you can't defeat me." With his eyes fixed on slits, Naruto growled, "Want to place a wager?" Sora sprang after him and leapt over the edge as he kicked at her, flew away from her, and backflipped onto the building's edge before plunging to the streets below. When his customer gave him some cash for a crate of apples, a man extended his hand, but he immediately leapt away when a human figure fell on top of his stand, shattering it into splinters. Sora landed beside the stand, and Naruto flipped up and dashed into the crowd. She took a few hundred ryo out of her wallet and said, "This is for the stand, ya." Nay, and leapt into the throng to pursue Naruto. Naruto ran up the wall and landed on the roof after ducking into an alleyway. When Sora spotted him, she sprinted after him and watched him go toward the residential area, taking a kunai from her pouch and throwing it in Naruto's direction. As the kunai approached, Naruto leapt and flipped to avoid being struck. "Oh shit!" he exclaimed when he realized what kind of kunai it was. It had 3 prongs and a seal on the hilt. Sora appeared out of nowhere, swung her sword at him, and he was suddenly surrounded by a golden glow. He managed to swing Shesmu before he suffered too much damage, but the force of the swing across the rooftops caused him to lose his hold, and Shesmu impaled the building's side beyond his reach. With her sword ready to immobilize the blonde, Sora landed and ran in Naruto's direction. When Naruto saw her approaching, he extracted a kunai from his kunai pouch, swung it in time to deflect Sora's blade, and punched her. When Sora reached into her pouch and took out chakra restraining ropes, he moaned in agony and said, "You are coming back with me to Konoha Uto, whether it be on your own 2 feet or over somebody's shoulders." She then reached out to grab his wrists and bind him. No. At that moment, he flipped up on his back and kicked her in the face, breaking her nose, before turning to face Shesmu, still impaled in the wall. When Sora felt her nose break, she hissed in pain. Her eyes widened when she saw Naruto running up the wall toward Shesmu. "Shit, I have to stop him," she said, throwing a Hiraishin kunai at Naruto. 10 feet from grabbing it, Naruto was blinded by a burst of golden light as the Hiraishin kunai abruptly impaled the wall in front of him. He shielded his eyes and kept walking, but when the light dimmed, he opened them to see Sora right before her foot struck her face. Smirking, she prepared to toss another Hiraishin kunai, but Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Ori GHH. When she turned around, she saw Naruto leaping at her, spinning in midair, and slamming his heels bottom into her shoulder. The force of Naruto's blow caused her bones to crack as she fell to the ground. "I am going to finish this. Once and for all," yelled Naruto as he landed on Shesmu. With the intention of killing, he snatched Shesmu, yanked it from the wall, and dove toward Sora, bringing it down. Rolling out of the path of the approaching weapon, Sora snatched up her katana. Naruto swung Shesmu underneath Sora, causing her to backflip as she swung a blow at him. He deflected her blades by extending Shesmu, and she blocked his kick with her forearm. The two squared off and engaged in combat. As Sora swung her katana, Naruto pushed Shesmu forward. The two weapons caught each other, and Sora's katana got caught between the 3 pikes. The two struggled as they continued to try to advance with their attacks. When Naruto attempted to free Shesmu from Sora's katana, he snarled as his eyes narrowed completely, and Sora started to stumble due to the strain of holding Shesmu in place. Crack! When Sora's katana blade broke under the pressure Shesmu was applying to it, her eyes widened. Taking advantage of this distraction, Naruto slammed Shesmu down after kicking Sora twice in the face and causing her to fall onto her back. When Sora looked to her throat, she saw that her neck was pinned to the ground between 2 of Shesemu's 3 prongs. Naruto was panting above her, staring at her with hatred in his eyes. "I win," he snorted and ripped Shesmu from the ground, then turned away, jumping off the building's edge and landing in a crowd, whereupon he instantly vanished from view. Sora sat up slowly and let the tears fall freely down her cheeks. She had found her brother, but within minutes, she had lost him once more. In the meantime, it makes perfect sense. How else could they have gained my cursed seal's power? Orochimaru smiled with satisfaction as he reviewed his research. He had tested a number of people with different abilities. Some had great control over their chakra, body parts, or surrounding objects, while his other subjects lacked control over any of these. Those with a great deal of control were the ones who survived, while those without perished. He found the cause of this phenomenon after closely examining their cadavers. It seemed as though the enzymes in the cursed seal entered the body and stuck to the body and chakra network, causing the cursed seal to alter the body to fit its requirements. This is where the problem started. For the cursed seal to be able to mutate the body, it had to be able to freely flow throughout the body, and those who could control parts of the body also had the natural ability to allow the cursed seal to change those parts. "I will have Konoha burning at my feet soon enough if this is all it takes to create my new army," he said with a smile after conducting his research. Time skip. Finals of the Chunin exam. Only 2 of the 12 finalists were present in the stadium when Minato and Kushina surveyed it. All of the Jinchuriki had disappeared during the month long break, and not a single one was visible, it was as though they had disappeared from the face of the planet. Their individual villages were becoming anxious. Hotaru of the Tsuchigumo clan and Terumi Mei, Godem Mizukage of Kirigakure, were concerned about the fate of Utakata, whom she regarded as her teacher, and Mei was concerned that the jutsu used on Yagura might have failed and that he might return to seek them out with vengeance. The Yondaime Reikage of Kumogakure, Yatsuki-e, was clenching his fists nervously because neither his brother nor his top genin were there, and no one could even trace them. As a Kage, he was concerned about the possibility that an enemy village would get both of their Jinchurikis, but as a brother and friend, he was terrified of losing the people he loved. Sandame Tsuchikage of Iwagakure, Ryodanban no Onoki, was complaining to himself that his best subordinates could not even bother to arrive on time. The Kage was waiting for Gaara to appear, just tapping his fingers on his chair. Shino began to worry about his apprentice, Amaru, who usually checked in frequently. Takigakure leader Shibuki was concerned about Fu. With a sigh, Minato leaned forward and asked, "Where is he? The exams are about to start." Now, sweetie," Kushina said, placing her hand on Minato's shoulders. "The exam is still a few minutes away, he'll be there." Turning to Kushina, Minato said, "But what if he doesn't? You witnessed Sora's state upon her return, she was extremely depressed." Sora had returned a week ago, had not spoken to anyone, had locked herself in her room and refused to let anyone in, and Kushina had to threaten her to attend the exams. Kushina lowered her head. Hyuga Neji and Uchiha Sasuke, meanwhile, were waiting for their opponents in the middle of the stadium. In addition to trying to control his curse mark and strengthen his Kaiden Jutsu, Sasuke had spent the entire month training alone because Kakashi had been wallowing in the last week of the month over their inability to locate Naruto. He had spent hours every night honing his single jutsu, going through the entire Uchiha clan vault and learning every technique he could. He was now proficient in a good deal of Kaiden Jutsu. But Neji was a different person than he had been before the tests. He had a cold-blooded monster's manner. His clothes were ripped in many places by what appeared to be stretch marks. His teeth appeared slightly sharper, and if one looked closely, they could smell the telltale smell of blood emanating from him. He had become cruel and heartless, losing his fate-loving personality. Because they were afraid of what he would do to them, no one in the Branch family would approach him anymore. A number of people in the stands were anxiously anticipating the arrival of one particular genin, Naruto. Iruka had spent his time trying to persuade people who believed the Yondaime's words not to do so because he was so concerned about Naruto's disappearance and had attempted to be assigned to the Hokage's team to go and find him, but he was consistently turned down for the silliest of reasons. As a result, he lost a lot of friends in the shinobi and civilian forces. In the hopes of being the first to see Naruto, Hinata had arrived here before the sun had even risen, waiting for the blonde Jinchuriki to finally show up. Now, 5 minutes before the final exam, she was still unable to see the blonde. Despite having the best view of the fights from her seat at the front of the stadium, Sora was more interested in seeing her Otouto, whom her family had pushed away, than she was in the fights. She now realized how foolish her parents were, but it was too late to make any changes. Looking up at the cage booth, Hayate sighed and said, "If the other opponents don't come here soon, they will all be disqualified." Then he felt a gust of wind start to blow through the arena, and he stopped. As the winds increased, Sasuke and Neji attempted to solidify their position. To get a better view, Minato, Kushina, and everyone else in the cage booth leaned over the edge. The earth cracked and sparks flew out as the wind started to cycle around one spot, and the stadium was briefly blinded by a flash of light. Everyone turned to see what had happened as the light faded. 15 people: Amaru, Gaara, Yugito, Yagura, Roshi, Han, Utakata, Fu, Kurabi, Naruto, and 5 others no one knew, were seated on top of a big piece of earth with a cylindrical bottom in the center of the stadium. The only one of them who had changed physically was Naruto, who had abandoned his orange jumpsuit in favor of a long white cloak with black tribal markings all over it, a dazzling weapon slung over his shoulder, his hair slicked back and tied in a ponytail, and darker whisker marks. Glancing quickly at Neji, Naruto opened his eyes and said, "I suggest everyone get out of the field, now." The other Jinchuriki gave a nod and stood up using Shunshin. "For luck," Haku said as he approached Naruto and planted a kiss on him. Grinning and stroking her chin, Naruto said, "Thank you, Haku-chan." Haku chuckled as she approached the other 4, who emerged in the stands engulfed in a whirlpool of water. "I would suggest you get out of the field, unless you want to get caught in the crossfire," Naruto said, turning to face Sasuke. Naruto looked at Neji and said, "I hope you remember the promise I made a month ago, that if I ever ended up being your opponent, you..." Sasuke shivered at the expression in Naruto's eyes and hurried out of the field. Would pass away. A dark smile appeared on Neji's face as he scoffed, saying, "By the end of this match, one of us will be dead, but it sure as hell won't be me." As Hayate took a step back, the two exchanged glances and said, "The first Chunin exam match, Hajime." Neither of the two fighters moved as they gazed at one another. As their muscles tightened, Naruto's cerulean blue eyes met Neji's pristine white eyes. Leaning over the railing, everyone was waiting to see who would initiate contact. Neji smirked abruptly, and disappeared. With a sly grin on his face, Neji was about to drive a kunai into Naruto's back when he abruptly swung Shesmu behind him while, clang. Within the stadium, the audience was completely taken aback by what had happened. How could a genin have known Shunshin? When Hinata witnessed her Naruto-kun thwart Neji's attack, she grinned. Sora had a big smile on her face and was trying not to yell like a fangirl. Higher up in the stands, Ora was giving the classic Uchiha smirk, Moka and Gaara were pumping their arms in silent support of the blonde, Zabuza was smiling and flashing his sharp teeth, and Haku was giving Naruto a tender smile. What Neji had accomplished shocked Guy and Lee, who were seated together in the stands. Amazing, I never thought I would see the day where Neji learned something other than a Hyuga technique. After giving a nod, Lee said, "Yes, it is most youthful to see Neji taking up a style other than his clan's." They were unaware that it wasn't the case. After Sasuke's Sharingan, which he had trained to have up to 2 tomo in each eye, was activated, he saw what Neji had done, and it wasn't Shunshin. That wasn't a technique at all. It was raw speed, Sasuke said, narrowing his eyes. Neji had moved so fast in less than a second that his Sharingan had had to strain to keep up. If Naruto hadn't moved then, he would have been dead, he said, casting a worried glance at him. Sasuke was caught in a bind. While he was happy for his fellow genin that he had just defeated the year's rookie, he was also unsure of how long Naruto could hold out. In his prayer to Kami, Sasuke hoped Naruto would persevere and live. Returning to the battle as his kunai collided with Shesmu, Neji smiled and applied pressure. "I see you have a couple more tricks up your sleeve." Failure. Neji's eyes briefly went black, and his veins swelled around his eyes and in his arms. "But so have I," he said, applying more pressure to Shesmu, which caused sparks to fly as the two weapons clashed. When Naruto noticed the flash of black in Neji's eyes, he narrowed his eyes and tightened his hold on Shesmu. "Tricks are for fools," he growled, "and for cowards." He kicked Neji, but the Hyuga's forearm blocked it instantly. He then twisted Shesmu, sending the kunai in Neji's hand flying to the side. When Neji threw a Juukan strike at Naruto, he sneered and spun in the air to avoid the tri-pronged spear. Naruto grabbed Neji by the wrist and pulled him towards him so that Shesmu could impale him. After pulling Neji to the ground, Naruto raised his knee and buried it in the Hyuga's face, shattering his nose and sending him hurtling through the air. With a vile snarl, Neji tried to swing his foot down at Naruto, but Shesmu stopped him. Backflipping onto the patch of earth the Jinchuriki had brought with them, Neji swore. As he glared at Neji, Naruto started to spin Shesmu around in his fingers, gradually increasing the speed of the staff. As he dropped into his Juukan stance, Neji sneered and said, "Come on, failure, make a move. Or are you too much of a coward to back your threats?" Booth. Cage Minato gripped his chair and gave Neji a vile glare. How could he insult his child? He considered going down there and tearing the little pest's eyes out of their sockets. Watch how Hyuga enjoys being oblivious to their surroundings. Putting a comforting hand on Minato's shoulder, Kushina said, "Minato. Don't worry. Our son will let him know who he is playing with. You'll see." With a sigh and a deep, purifying breath, Minato said, "Yes, Kushina," and turned back to face the arena. His eyes widened when he realized what Naruto was doing. Returning to the battle, Naruto continued to accelerate Shesemu's spin until the force it was projecting caused the dirt surrounding him to start flying. As Shesmu spun faster and faster, Neji watched Naruto intently. His eyes narrowed when he noticed a burst of chakra pass through the staff. He glanced at Naruto and said, "What, you think you can enhance that pathetic piece of garbage by shooting chakra through it? Ha! As if some no-talent fool like you will ever stand a chance at defeating me, even if you are the Kyuubi Jinchuriki." Other than a minor increase in chakra output, Naruto did not respond to Neji's statement. Neji was about to say something else when his Byakugan noticed something strange in Shesemu's staff. "Is that a?" he asked. Instead of spinning Shesmu, Naruto abruptly stopped and jabbed the tripronged end into the ground before launching himself into the air and carrying Shesmu with him. He then swung Shesmu down as it unlinked, creating a long chain that spun down towards the ground. Neji said, "Whatever you have planned, it won't wo," with a snort and lowered himself into his Jukin stance. As Shizmu cut through the ground brought by the Jinchuriki, the earth Neji was standing on exploded from the force of Naruto's swing. Shisemu's three-pronged end tapped the ground. As Shizmu sliced through the ground in front of him, Neji's eyes widened and he jumped out of the way. He avoided the falling debris by using his newfound speed. As Shizmu transformed back into a staff, Naruto appeared behind Neji and swung it. Crack! He hit Neji's back, sending him hurtling toward an approaching rock and slamming into it. Crack! The sound of his ribs breaking reverberated throughout the arena. "It's finished," Naruto said as he turned around and started to leave after watching the debris fall on top of the fallen Hyuga. "The victor of the first round of the Chunin exams is..." "Crash," said Hayate, nodding his head and raising his arm. He then snapped his head in the direction of the debris that covered Neji as it burst outward, scattering stone fragments everywhere. Backpedaling, Hayate blasted away as many of the flying projectiles as he could with his years of experience wielding a Jonin rank sword. Shizmu was used by Naruto in the same way, but some of the shards managed to get through and lodged themselves in his arms and legs. He looked up at the source of the shards and winced. "Is that the best you can do, Namikaze?" A smirking Neji laughed as he stood in a cloud of dirt. Haishi Hyuga stands Hiashi's eyes went wide with surprise. As soon as the battle began, he had triggered his Byakugan. The speed and strength the two genin were exhibiting astounded him. It was more than anyone so young ought to have been able to portray. Since all of Hiashi's ribs were broken in the collision and he was buried by the debris, he initially believed the fight was over when Naruto sent Neji hurtling into one of the flying boulders. Instead, Neji had broken free from the debris using a main house technique called the Kaiden, which allowed him to fight once more. However, the same energy that he had used for the Kaiden had also been used to heal his ribs to their ideal condition. It was not chakra, whatever it was that Neji used with the Kaiden, it was simply too bad. Returning to the battle with a wince, Naruto withdrew the stone fragment from his arms and legs before assuming a fighting stance while grasping Shizmu with both hands. "What's the matter, fool? Can't handle a little scratch?" Neji said with a sly grin. He spat out something from his mouth, revealing a blood-covered tooth. Smirking and scoffing, Naruto said, "Looks like you aren't in any position to talk." Neji growled and dropped into what looked like a Jukin stance, but it had characteristics of the Inuzuka clan. "Sume Inuzuka stance. What is that, Hyuga? If your nephew has been stealing clan taijutsu styles, then so help me I..." Sume growled and turned to face Haishi, who was seated 3 seats away. "If Neji has altered the Jukin style of fighting, I have had no prior knowledge of it." He glanced at Sume. "In fact, in the last month, the only time I have seen him is when I pass by him in the streets." Sume turned to face the arena and scoffed after being surprised by Hiashi's candor. Returning to the battle as they watched their opponent and waited for them to move, Neji and Naruto slowly edged their footwork to either side while staring at one another. The two leapt for each other and launched their attack as soon as a single leaf touched the ground. Naruto tried to toss Neji over his shoulder, but Neji swung his hand down like a claw swipe, and Naruto grabbed his wrist. The Hyuga prodigy tried to swing Naruto over him and discard him by using him as a vault and grabbing onto his shirt. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu was swiftly performed by Naruto, and 3 other Narutos grabbed each other's feet while the original was flung over Neji's shoulders. Naruto pole vaulted using the clones, landing on his feet, and then charged at Neji, wielding Shizmu as a lance. The sound of metal slamming into metal echoed throughout the arena as Neji swiftly whipped out a kunai in each hand and placed each one between Shisemu's prongs. As he jabbed the blunt end of Shizmu into Neji's chest, Naruto twisted Shizmu, causing Neji to release his hold on his 2 kunai and swing Shizmu, flinging the kunai far from Neji. Too preoccupied to stop Naruto from kicking him in the face, Neji staggered back and coughed. Then, he performed a backflip and struck his chin with the tip of his foot, sending him hurtling through the air. Naruto swiftly made a hand gesture as he landed from his backflip and disappeared. He suddenly materialized above Neji through Shunshin, with Shizmu hovering over him. Neji opened his eyes in time to see Shizmu crack into his chest, sending him straight to the ground with the snap of his ribs. Boom! As Neji crashed into the ground, a cloud of dirt covered him. Naruto landed directly next to the dirt cloud, holding Shizmu firmly in his hands. In the stands as she started to bounce up and down, Haku was grinning giddy. "Yay Naruto.kun!" she exclaimed, jumping up and down like a cheerleader. Zabuza said, "That's my boy." Laughing. With their signature grins and clenched fists, Moka and Gaara said, "All right." As she exclaimed, "Way to go, Naruto," Ora smiled. "Way to go, Foxy." The Jinchuriki were yelling at their fellow Jinchuriki in the stands of the competition. "Woohh, go Foxy go, yeah bro, you showed him who's boss." In the stands, Hinata was grinning and clenching her fists, saying, "Naruto-kun." She was pleased that Naruto had prevailed, but she was also upset that he had to beat her cousin so viciously. Sora exclaimed, "Way to go Naruto, Otuto," with a big smile. The whole audience cheered, including the Hyuga, as the son of the Namikaze clan defeated the Hyuga prodigy. Taking a deep breath, Haishi reached into his vest and produced a scroll. "I suppose I have kept this from him for too long," he said, holding it lightly. "I apologize for letting you down, Haishi." Within the arena, after approaching the crater where Neji was lying, Hayate examined him. His chakra was depleted and his bones were broken. Besides, he was probably unconscious. "The winner of the first round of the Chunin exams is," Hayate said as he got to his feet and held up his hand, but he was stopped when Shesmu held his triangular end in front of his face. He turned to face Naruto, who was wearing a chilly expression. He turned to Neji and clutched Shesemu's shaft, saying, "No, it is not over. This fight isn't over. Until one of us dies." Stans the blonde Jinchuriki was the object of everyone's horrified and shocked gaze. The Yondaime's son, the one who had preached that he would become a Hokage superior to all others, was something they could not believe. Was he going to murder another shinobi, just after declaring victory? Battle Hayate was staring at Naruto. "Naruto. I am afraid I can't allow you to do that. You have won the fight, so there is no need to. Tell me this, if you are on a mission, and you come into contact with an enemy shinobi, and you engage him in a fight. You fight to win, do you not?" "Yes, but you have already won so," said Hayate, nodding his head. "And tell me this, if you let your enemy go free when you have claimed your victory, what is stopping said enemy shinobi from coming after you again for revenge? What is stopping him from harming the ones you love if you are not there to help them?" He tightly grasped the hilt of Shesmu. I, said Hayate, looking down as he considered Yugo. "The answer is, there is nothing that will stop him from trying to seek revenge for his humiliation. The only thing that will ensure that the enemy never tries to get revenge," Naruto said, denying him the opportunity to finish. He turned to face Neji and said, "Is to end his life." He then turned to face Hayate and said, "Besides, I do not make idle threats, not anymore." Hayate gazed up at Naruto, bewildered and shocked. He pointed to himself and said, "I am his opponent, now I must stand by my word." Naruto went on, "I swore to Neji that if I was ever his opponent, I would see to it that I kill him." He snapped his head away from Hayate and said, "Do not try and stop me," before approaching the fallen Neji and letting Hayate lower his head. Hayate sighed. Naruto had every right to kill Neji because he had given his life to these tests when he signed a waiver, and the Chunin exams were meant to be a substitute for war, but even in that case, death was guaranteed. Within the cage booth, well, looks like Konoha actually has a genin with a good head on his shoulders. And he's smart to boot. Yatsukie grinned at Minato, saying, "I gotta say, you sure as hell trained your Jinchuriki well." I didn't," Minato said, glancing down at his statement. This caused his eyes to widen slightly. "You didn't?" He glanced between the Yondaime and Naruto. "You never trained your Jinchuriki, your son?" "How do you know that the Jinchuriki is the son of the Kiroi Senku?" asked Onoki, raising an eyebrow. "It's an unwritten custom for the Jinchuriki to have some blood ties to the village chief," he said, turning to face Onoki. He snorted, "Besides, you would have to be blind not to notice the similarities between the two of them. Hell, the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi is my baby brother, and the Jinchuriki of the Nibi is the stepdaughter of the Sandaime Reikage's son." With a sigh, Onoki turned away. "But back to the question, you never once trained your own son?" he asked, turning his head to face Minato. "Then, who in hell taught him?" As Kushina gave a stern look, Minato turned away and said, "Can you please show a bit more tact, my husband?" Minato looked down and said, "Nobody," in a barely audible voice, "nobody ever trained him. Nobody ever took care of him. I didn't even see him for 13 years. Since I left the day after he was born." The idea that a Jinchuriki's own father neglected his son for more than 10 years is astounding. A snarled and stared at Minato incredulously before snapping his head in the direction of the arena. Despite his tough exterior, he looked out for his baby brother, who was a Jinchuriki. He was repulsed by it. "Well, at least he turned out all right in my book," he sighed as he glanced down at Naruto. Within the arena, gazing down at Neji, Naruto charged Kitsunji's Yuki into the staff while spinning Shizmu in his hand and charging his own chakra into it. Naruto stood directly beside Neji. In the stands, no. I can't let him kill him, not the only thing I have left of my brother. Haishi Hyuga's eyes widened in shock and fear. He hurriedly got up and fled the aisle, hoping he could break up the fight before his nephew died. When Hinata realized what Naruto was going to do, her heart practically stopped, and she was unable to keep herself conscious and passed out instantly. Her eyes widened in shock. Naruto.kun. Sora bowed her head in embarrassment, realizing that, despite her best efforts, she was to blame for Naruto's current state. Moka and Gaara stood guard. Zabuza took a serious look, Haku adopted a firm stance, and Ora grinned and said, "Good riddance, Hyuga." Within the arena, Naruto's eyes changed from cerulean blue to crimson red as his nails grew longer and sharper into claws. And Shizmu spun in his hand faster and faster as a thin layer of red and blue chakra dripped off the weapon. Stands hoping to arrive in time to prevent Naruto from killing Neji, Haishi Hyuga sprinted as fast as he could down the stairs. When Hanabi noticed the chakra floating off of Shizmu, she squinted her eyes and quickly activated her Byakugan to see what was happening. She was shocked to see that a red chakra was leaking from Naruto's abdomen into his natural chakra system, which he was charging into his staff. Amazing. I have never seen anything so. Hanabi blurted out her thoughts when she noticed something in the corner of her Byakugan's vision and asked, "Neji, Nissan." When she concentrated her Byakugan's vision, she noticed something startling. Chakra. No. Neji's coils were being inundated with an odd energy, but it wasn't chakra. Battle. This is for Hinata, Naruto exclaimed as he brought Shizmu down to impale the Hyuga prodigy. He stopped spinning Shizmu and took it in both hands, holding it high above him as he positioned it above Neji's heart. As Haishi ran out, the door leading to the arena from the stands slammed open, saying, "No stop." Shizmu was brought down by Naruto to force it into Neji's heart. Squelch. Drip. 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 Was the distinctive sound of blood dripping. Shizmu had pierced Neji. Not his heart, though. Impossible, Naruto said, looking down at the Hyuga below him in disbelief. The far ends of Shizmu's tri-pronged end were able to pierce through Neji's palms because his hands had shot up in time. Neji opened his eyes slowly, grinned, and then pushed Shizmu on, causing Naruto to stagger backwards as the Hyuga prodigy abruptly stood up again with a whirling motion. Impossible. I used Kitsunji's chakra along with mine when I thrust down. Even if he was quick enough to catch it, there is no way he could have stopped my attack. It should have killed him, said Naruto, his eyes wide with shock. A spooky smile appeared on Neji's face as he appeared to notice the fear in Naruto's eyes. What's the matter, Namikaze? Are you surprised? He chuckled ominously as he started to circle, and Naruto followed suit as he prepared Shizmu. I'm sure you're wondering how he could have stopped my strike, given that it was powered by the Kyuubi's chakra. Am I mistaken? Naruto growled and clenched Shizmu in his arms. Neji grinned and said, I take it as a yes. I am correct. He stopped and turned his head so that Naruto could only see the side of it. Don't you want me to tell you how I accomplished that? Neji said, letting out a dark laugh. He looked at Naruto, and as he turned his head and his eye twitched wildly, his lips formed a vicious smile. Better yet, how about I show you? As Neji yelled, a dark purple chakra enveloping him sent a tiny shockwave out, knocking Naruto back a few feet. When Naruto first saw the bite mark on Neji's arm, he was about to question it. How? This is demonic chakra. How the fuck does he have it? He asked, looking at Neji. Melkia. Kitsunji said, and Naruto froze, wondering why he was afraid. Kitsunji. Sensei, what's causing your fear? The other Jinchuriki with. The Biju were being asked the same question by the other Jinchuriki. What role did Melkia play in this, and why in the world were they afraid of him? In the bleachers. Now Kitsunji, we will see how your Jinchuriki fares. Against my vengeance. Said a dark figure with a sly grin, his unusually long canines gleaming in the darkness. He laughed darkly, his eyes turning canine. Like, his teeth gradually sharpening. Returning to the battle, now watch Namikaze. As I show you how pointless your efforts truly are, Neji said, crouching low and smiling like a crazy man. Neji began to laugh maniacally. And then he suddenly stopped, and cried out in pain as the sound of his bones cracking was heard. He grabbed his shirt and tore it off as he fell to his knees, the sign of his chest expanding and his ribs protruding from his chest prevalent. Neji threw his head back, a gghhh, and let out a cry of pain. As Naruto took a step back and watched Neji change before his eyes grew wide. Neji dropped to his knees and immediately rolled his arms into himself. He then got back up on his knees and opened his mouth to scream in pain once more. AWOOHHH, however, it was replaced by the sound of a wolf howling. With his legs growing longer as his shinobi sandals tore apart and his feet transformed into savage paws, Neji's chest cracked and expanded as he stood back up. His hands grew fur as his nails turned into claws, and his hair grew longer and more shaggy as he reached up and tore off his headband, slashing his claws across the leaf symbol. With his jaw clenched, Neji raised his head and exclaimed, AWOOHHH. His eyes turned from pure white to solid black, and his face grew a little longer as fur covered it. When Naruto saw what Neji had turned into, he shuddered in terror. Neji now stood on distorted wolf-like legs, one of which was longer than the other, while the other appeared more human-like. His arms were bulkier and longer, but they were also uneven. His right arm had thicker, much larger claws, while his other arm had longer, sharpened, pointed nails. His body was mostly covered in fur the same color as his hair, but his chest, parts of his limbs, and the left side of his face were all bald. His face was wolfish, but it was short, and his teeth were hanging out at random. It would have looked silly if they weren't so damn sharp. He was a monstrosity. Neji, Haishi said, staring at his nephew in disbelief. With a ruthless grin, Neji snapped his head in Haishi's direction and said, well, if it isn't my father's murderer. He turned to face Haishi and growled, Haishi-sama, I've been waiting for this for a long time. He approached the shaky, looking Haishi. Your father wouldn't want you to. Gach, so please, stop. Neji wrapped his larger claw around Haishi's throat, lifting him up by the throat. Haishi, don't you dare tell me what my father desired. No, not after you killed him. Haishi gasped for air as he started to squeeze his throat. Neji. Page please. Why? Your father, there was. Gasp. Nothing I could do to stop him, Haishi gasped, struggling to breathe. Here. Why? Your father wrote it W.way. He said, holding out the scroll, H. He knocked me out before he sacrificed himself. I know that, you old fool, Neji said, throwing Haishi to the ground. What makes you believe that I despise you so much? Haishi stared up at Neji as he tried to breathe. Snuck into your office 3 days ago and found that scroll sitting right on top of your desk. Choking, Haishi said, Then why? As he stalked towards Haishi, he said, because you were weak. You were so weak you could not stop my father from going to his death. Now, retribution finally comes to me. Haishi. Sama. He swung his large claws down to cleave Haishi in half. Clang. Only to have Shizmu, grasped by one Naruto, block the claws. Get out of the arena, Hyuga. This is my fight, Naruto said, turning to face Haishi, who was looking at him in disbelief. Haishi nodded his head before darting back in the direction of the exit. The person who attempted to murder him was no longer his nephew. He was gone. Once more, he had let his brother down. Now that we are no longer interrupted, shall we finish what we started before? Naruto asked, turning to face Neji. With a menacing smile, Neji abruptly swung his other arm and slashed it across Naruto's chest. Ag. Naruto staggered back, clutching his chest, which now had 4 deep slash marks across it. He was about to strike back, but a hard kick to his stomach sent him flying back into the wall. Before he could get his feet off the wall, he was slammed with a series of blows, grabbed by his hair, and his face slammed into Neji's knee as he slid down the wall. Ah, what's the matter, Namikaze? Can't take the pain? Neji smirked and grabbed him by his hair before throwing Naruto so hard that he flew to the opposite side of the arena. In order to avoid colliding with the wall head on, Naruto dug his feet into the ground as he skidded across the dirt. He forced himself to his knees, but when a foot fell on his back, he fell back into the dirt. Stay in the dirt where you belong, Namikaze. Neji sneered, grinning darkly in his wolf form, as he continued to slam his feet into Naruto's back. Then used his larger claw to grab Naruto by the back of his neck, bringing his face into view of Neji Hyuga's snarling maw, or, more accurately, what was once Neji Hyuga. Naruto grimaced in agony, feeling as though a sledgehammer had struck his body. How did it come to this? He asked. The blonde-haired Jinchuriki flew through the air as Neji snarled and brought Naruto's head down while kicking upwards. Am I really this weak? Did I come all this way for nothing? The arena floor cracked like spiderwebs as Neji leapt to his feet and struck Naruto in the chest with a dropping heel strike, sending him hurtling to the ground. A savage smile appeared on Neji's face as he kicked Naruto onto his back after landing next to him. Shizmu was lying just 10 feet away from Naruto when he turned his head sideways and moaned in agony. His hasty attempt to crawl toward it was thwarted when Neji stepped on his hands, preventing him from going any farther. With a dark smirk, Neji kicked Naruto in the face, breaking his nose as he flew into the wall. "Is this the best you've got? What happened to the shinobi who I was fighting just minutes ago? Was all that a one-trick pony? Do you have nothing left?" Neji snarled cruelly as he lifted Naruto up by the throat. As he lay limply in Neji's grasp, Naruto did not respond. "How pitiful. And I was hoping you would be more fun," Neji said with a snort, held up his other claw. "In the stands, please. Naruto-kun. Please, don't die," Haku prayed while holding her hands, trembling. Zabuza's fists were clenched as he said, "Naruto, get up now." "Come on Naruto, get up," exclaimed Moka, while Gaara was more outspoken. Ora yelled, "Move your ass Naruto. Wake up Naruto. Kun," Haku yelled at the top of her lungs after taking a deep breath. Returning to the battle, opening his eyes, Naruto moaned, Haku, Circa-chan." Neji arched an eyebrow and turned to face the source of the yell. He noticed a young girl with soft eyes, a lovely face, and long black hair. She was looking at Naruto with concern. He tightened his grip on Naruto's throat and said, "After I kill you, I am going to show her a good time. For me?" A leerous grin crept up Neji's features as he swung his claws to Naruto's throat. Well, it seems the little Namikaze has a girlfriend." Crunch. Only to have to suppress a cry of agony as he felt his fingers being crushed. He turned to face his hand, which was resting on iron claws. He pursued the arm until he reached its owner. His eyes turned from cerulean to blood red. Naruto was growling venomously at him, and a threatening red aura was emanating from him. Neji's hand was squeezing down on his throat when Naruto abruptly grabbed it. He then started to crush it in his hands and forcefully pry it off of him. It felt as though Tsunade herself was holding Neji as he struggled in Naruto's grasp. With a vile snarl, Naruto advanced and pushed Neji back, smashing his forehead against Neji's face before slamming a fist at his throat, causing him to gasp for air as Naruto mercilessly punched him in the stomach, the red glow growing stronger and stronger until it started to take shape. Booth. Cage. Now we can see how strong Konoha's Jinchuriki really is. Tsurumi Mei grinned. Minato gazed down at Naruto with concern, saying, "Please, Naruto, stay safe." As she looked down at her child, the one she had given birth to, the one she had left behind, Kushina was thinking similar things. "Battle. You can insult me. You can threaten me. You can even injure my pride," Naruto said, grabbing Neji by the hair and bringing him down to meet his knee before slamming him into the dirt with his heel down on the back of Neji's head. "But the moment you threaten those whom I love, you will die," he exclaimed, his aura leaking red as it took the shape of a two-tailed fox. As Neji collapsed back to the ground, Naruto turned to face Shizmu, who was lying on the ground, and hurried over to it. The staff unlinked and shot towards the falling dog beast Hyuga after he picked up Shizmu, pointed the blunt end at Neji, and charged chakra into it. With enough force to send falling debris to the ground and spiderweb cracks to penetrate the wall, Neji was struck in the stomach and flung towards the opposite side of the wall. Naruto swung on Shizmu, dragging Neji through the wall while growling and yelling a battle cry. Neji was smashed through the rock and stone and crashed through the wall, probably breaking a few bones. As Shizmu started to grow back to its normal length, Naruto finally halted and charged at Neji, the trident end pointing toward a spot on the wall. When the staff was no longer pressed against Neji's stomach, he collapsed. "See you in hell," Naruto sneered as he pushed Shizmu forward. Crack, squelch, Neji's black eyes widened and stared at Naruto in disbelief as he slowly glanced down at his chest. He had been stabbed clean through by Shizmu. Thump. Neji heard a familiar thumping sound and slowly turned his head to see something that completely startled him. His heart was ripped out of his chest and resting on Shisemu's middle prong. Blood trickled from Neji's mouth, and his head dropped as the light went out of his eyes. Hyuga Neji is Hyuga Hazashi's son, Hyuga Hinata and Hyuga Hanabi's cousin, and Hyuga Hiashi's nephew. Was deceased. Naruto's breath came in short gasps as he gripped Shizmu tightly, his eyes gradually turning back to their typical blue color as his tenant's Yuki gradually faded. His eyes were fixed on the dead Hyuga's lethal weapon. With a single motion and a hateful sneer, he took the offending corpse off his spear and let it drop to the ground. Naruto spat out, "Say hello to the Shinigami for me," as he looked down at Neji's corpse and slowly turned to face the crowd. The brutality of the fight's conclusion left the crowd stunned. They were all shocked to learn that Namikaze Minato's son had brutally murdered a fellow Konoha ninja. Reactions in the stands were mixed. While many Hyuga were relieved that they could live without fear of Neji, they were also upset that someone had killed one of them. The most conflicted was Hinata, who felt that Neji was family even though Neji had attempted to kill her. Hinata felt a slight pressure on her shoulder before she could finish thinking, and when she looked up, she saw her father. Her eyes instantly became cold, and she turned away. Knowing that his actions were the reason behind her behavior, Haishi let out a sigh to himself. "Hinata, may I speak to you, alone?" he said, taking a sigh. After a brief moment of looking up, Hinata nodded her head and said, "Hi, Haishi. Sama." Her voice was devoid of any emotion, and she stood up and trailed behind her father. With a sigh of relief, Naruto ascended the stairs to the waiting area and looked up to see what he should have anticipated. Finally, justice has been done. "Naruto, congratulations on your victory," his sister said, smiling strangely as she waited for him at the top of the stairs. Naruto walked past Sora, ignoring her entirely with a sneer and a chilly look. Knowing that she should have anticipated such a thing, Sora looked down as her heart twisted in her chest at the hatred and coldness Naruto showed just by being around her. To wait for the next battle, Naruto continued to ascend the stairs toward the competitor's booth. Naruto.kun. Naruto halted and pivoted, letting a grin spread across his face upon realizing who it was calling him, Haku-chan. Haku, his beloved, was approaching him, closely followed by Moka, Gaara, Ora, and Zabuza. Naruto sprinted over to embrace Haku and gave her a passionate, long-lasting kiss on her stunning lips. Holding him close to her as their lips brushed one another, Haku eagerly returned the kiss. The smile on Ora's face said, "Hey, get a room you too." "Shut up." Naruto and Haku snapped at Ora after breaking the kiss, but their angry tone and flushed faces only made Ora laugh until she fell to the ground. "Good job Naruto.kun," said Moka, grinning as she approached Naruto and Haku and put her arm around them. "Nice job, Naruto.kun. For a ninja," said Gaara with a smirk. As Ora gave him a playful headshake, Naruto laughed and said, "That was an awesome fight, Naruto, but you should have made him suffer a bit longer." "That's not the kid's style," Zabuza laughed behind Ora, adding, "He likes things to end quickly rather than draw them out." "You big softy, you're one to talk," Naruto grinned at Zabuza. While everyone else laughed at his misfortune, Zabuza moaned under his breath and his perspiration fell. With a smile, Naruto resumed his embrace with Haku, who was contentedly nestling against his neck. Chirp, chirp, chirp. When Naruto heard birds chirping, his ears perked up. Chirp chirp chirp. Chirp chirp chirp. Curry. When Naruto heard what sounded like the crackling of electricity, his ears twitched even more. Chirp chirp chirp. Crackle. Chirp chirp chirp. As Naruto looked up in the direction of the sound, his eyes gradually widened, and he saw Hatake Kakashi charging in their direction while brandishing a rakery. Aiming directly for Haku. At the same time, Kakashi. As Kakashi watched Naruto leave the arena, he balled his fists. A month ago, he had a knucklehead on his team, but this was different. This was a cold-blooded murderer who killed another Konoha.nin. To face the blonde, Kakashi rose from his chair and made his way toward the contestant waiting area. Taking hold of Kakashi's wrist, Kurenai said, "Kakashi, what are you doing?" Gazing at Kurenai, the cycloptic Jonin said, "I am going to talk to Naruto. What he did isn't right." Kakashi looked at Kurenai. "Remember what Neji did to Hinata? Naruto had every right to kill him for what he did. Neji tried to kill Hinata and..." He turned away from Kurenai and went to the waiting area after tearing his hand from Kurenai's grasp and saying, "Forget the Hyuga. Whatever happened to Naruto during the training month changed him. He would never kill a fellow Konoha.nin. No matter what, I will not let my sensei's son become a monster." After giving Kakashi a fierce look, Kurenai started to follow him, but Yugo interrupted, saying, "Leave him Kurenai. He isn't worth the effort." Kurenai sighed as she sat down, scowling at Yugo and then back at Kakashi. As he ascended the stairs to the waiting area, Kakashi's thoughts were racing through his head about what he had just witnessed, but it was impossible. He witnessed Naruto ruthlessly and senselessly kill a fellow Konoha.nin without cause, despite Naruto's refusal to do so a month prior, even when he was threatened with death. Naruto was altered by something that transpired during the month-long break, and he had to exert every effort to prevent his sensei's son from turning into a monster. He would revert to his previous self after learning the reason behind sensei's actions, wouldn't he? What was he thinking? Of course Naruto would. Naruto loved the Yondaime, and despite his anger, He would forgive Minato if he knew the true reason for his separation. He smiled as he walked into the space in front of the waiting area, keeping that thought in mind, and he was horrified by what he saw. Standing there with his student, Momochi Zabuza, and the woman who had been his accomplice appeared to be old friends. When Kakashi saw two individuals he had personally killed still alive, his eyes widened in horror. How was it possible they were still alive? Given their proximity to Naruto, Kakashi surmised that they were the cause of his transformation into a ruthless monster. He executed a series of hand seals without thinking, grabbed his wrist as it started to crackle with lightning chakra, and then turned to face the person closest to him, Zabuza's accomplice. He charged forward, aiming for the woman with his rakery blazing with lightning chakra. Overall point of view: after pushing Haku aside, Naruto swiftly defeated Shizmu and slammed the blunt side into Kakashi's chest, causing him to lose focus on the rakery. While Shizmu was still slammed into Kakashi's chest, he was thrown over Naruto and pinned to the wall, with Naruto's weapon's trident end pinning him between two of its spikes. Kakashi coughed up blood as his rakery spread. "You took her from me once, Hitaki. I will not let you take her from me again." Naruto growled scornfully at Kakashi, pressing his hand to his throat to make his point. Kakashi blew his nose. "Naruto, stop, they have brainwashed you. They have to be killed for their crimes. How dare you try to cast judgment on them, Hitaki, especially when you murdered them in cold blood." Naruto growled at Kakashi as the others retreated. Glancing at Naruto, Kakashi said, "Like what you did to Neji." Naruto grumbled. "Neji tried to murder his own cousin in cold blood. You however murdered them after they had done nothing." Kakashi refused to back down, saying, "They were the enemy. They had surrendered." Naruto yelled, giving Kakashi a vile glare. Zabuza and Haku winced when they thought of that day. They were missing. Nin, they could not be trusted, choked Kakashi. Snarling. And who was the one who marked them as missing? Nin. A tyrant who murdered his entire family just because he felt like it, and continued to amass a genocide against the entire race of Kekkei users. Or has your stupidity been coupled with blindness? Blood began to flow from Kakashi's head as his skull smashed into the concrete side after Naruto threw him to the side. "If I see you down here again, Hitaki, if I ever see you near me, or those I cherish ever again, I will personally see you suffer worse than any human being could hope to survive." Kakashi attempted to slowly stand up, but Shisemu's tip was aimed at his throat. His eyes were slitted, though there was a red tint around the rim of his eyes as he spoke, and his canines lengthened. "Now." With a loud gulp, Kakashi stood up and backed away slowly, while Naruto held the tip of Shizmu at his throat until he hurried away. After viciously pursuing the Jonin and temporarily putting Shizmu away, Naruto turned back to face the stadium. In the meantime, three figures, each with their features obscured by the shadows, entered a dimly lit hall on the outside of the Konoha arena. "You damned fool. Your curse was supposed to kill Kitsunji and his accursed host," snarled a figure wearing a long cloak and long spiked hair that ran down their back. "Watch your mouth, Ninjin. Do not think that because you have accelerated our plans further that you have the right to speak as if you were my better." The other figure snapped his head in the direction of the other figure. The man growled, "Were it not for me, you would have an entire country strong to deal with when your plan comes to fruition. You could not even succeed in this one simple task, kill the damn host. Now, let's not be hasty. Even if we did not succeed in killing the host, it is merely a small dent in our plans. After all, it seems as though soon, we shall have the strength to strike all the hosts down at once," said the last figure before the other one could break. After saying, "What do you mean?" the first figure. As it turned to face the man, the last figure said, "Surely you do not believe that fool Kitsunji is the mightiest of the Biju. He is merely the stand-in for the true power of the Biju." With a smile, the second figure said, "Ah, I see then, my lord." "What are you two talking about?" said the speaking first figure. As the other two scampered off, the last figure turned away and laughed ominously, saying, "Soon. The very tradition of the demon realm shall be their doom. They'll fight, they'll cry, and then, they'll die." He disappeared into the shadows. Booth of Hokage. When Minato saw what his own child had become as a result of his carelessness, he sat back in his chair with his head and shoulders lowered. Kushina tried to calm him by gently holding onto his arm. Yatsuki laughed. "Why do you comfort a man who has brought his misery upon himself?" With an angry expression, Kushina asked, "What right do you have to?" Onoki stood up and said, "Any man willing to abandon his children has no right to feel remorse for their own stupidity." Kushina frowned and was on the verge of yelling at him. As they scraped off the mess that was Neji's body, Kushina turned to face Mei, who was still icily staring at the arena. and any mother willing to abandon her flesh and blood for another, has no right to call herself as such. Looking at Minato, the Cascade said, I must agree with them Yandaime. You have failed in every aspect of a father. The Cascade was glared at by Minato, who growled, and what right do you have to lecture me when you were probably the worst father in all of Sanagecure's history? At least unlike you, I made the effort to take care of them. The Cascade scoffed, turning away. Something you can never boast for in regards to your only son. He narrowed his eyes. Minato turned away from the other cages and winced. Kushina bit her lip, then looked up to see Sora approaching them. Sora. Chan. She exclaimed as she hurried over. Sora. Chan, did yo. After passing Kushina, Sora made her way to the special booth reserved for shinobi nobles, which was located directly below the cage booth. Kushina bowed her head and remained motionless. After just 1 month, years of preparation, training, and self-assurance, she realized something she could no longer deny. Her entire family had disintegrated, after 10 minutes. My apologies for the long wait, we shall now proceed into the next round. Will Uchiha Sasuke and Sabaku no Gaara please come down to the arena? Genma said after the cleanup crew had completed clearing away the remains of Neji's corpse. After exchanging glances in the waiting area, Sasuke leapt to the arena and Gaara descended the stairs. In the stands, Sakura's eyes were filled with worry and concern for Sasuke as she looked down at him. Although it wasn't unusual for her, she was no longer experiencing her unbridled fangirl tendencies. To put it mildly, it was odd. After observing Sakura's anxiety, Ino said, Hey, don't worry. Sasuke is Uchiha, I am sure he will come out on top. At Ino's words, Sakura bowed her head. The blonde-haired Kunoichi is confused. Hey Sakura, what's wrong? With a gentle smile, Sakura said, Normally, I would agree with you in a heartbeat. But now I am not so sure. What? But Sasuke is Uchiha, Ino exclaimed, her eyes widening in surprise. Downcast, Sakura said, Often Ino, that isn't enough. Even though Ino had never bought into the nonsense of Uchiha superiority, she knew Sakura did, but now? Ino's eyes were wide with shock. What was Sakura's fate? Unbeknownst to Sakura or Ino, a dark spot on Sakura's skin started to slightly brighten. Alongside Sasuke feeling as if his skin were on fire, Sasuke grimaced and gripped his shoulder, digging his nails deeper into his flesh. After waiting for the burning to subside, he took his hand off of his side. The black, stained blood on his fingertips went unnoticed by him. Alongside Gaara, Gaara had just walked into the arena and could almost smell the tainted energy in the Uchiha's body. I know, child. Be careful, Shukaku said after hearing him, he is very far along. Gaara turned to face the final Uchiha in Konohagakure after giving a nod. The second match of the Chunin exams between Sabaku no Gaara and Uchiha Sasuke. Hajime, Genma said, glancing between the two opponents. After exchanging long looks with Sasuke, Gaara finally said, Surrender Uchiha. What? Asked Sasuke, quirking an eye. Gaara spoke out, Surrender Uchiha, I do not wish to harm you, you are merely an obstacle in the way of what is to come, whether you realize it or not. He points to Sasuke's shoulder, you have already felt the effects of being a casualty of this war. Do not strain yourself further, surrender now, and perhaps we can heal you. Sasuke gazed at Gaara, perplexed. What on earth did Gaara mean when she said, what is to come? How could he have been a war casualty? Which war? He is trying to psyche me out, make me give up before I can even be given a chance, said Sasuke with a frown, but I am not falling for it. Sasuke activated his Sharingan and dropped into a combat stance. Gaara simply looked at him. I am giving you one last chance, surrender now, or I will not be held accountable for what is to happen to you. With a sly smile, Sasuke said, I would love to see you try. With a heavy sigh, Gaara closed his eyes and gazed at Sasuke. Very well, he said, but his eyes suddenly snapped open as his body exploded into sand. What the? Oh if. Sasuke's eyes widened, and he was suddenly struck from behind, sending him flying forward. When Sasuke looked back as he was flying through the air, he saw Gaara start to appear directly behind him. He had been standing there before, with his leg extended in a side kick, which he slowly lowered back to the ground. Sasuke swore, straightened up in midair, and his feet made contact with the floor. Oh if. Only to have a pillar of sand and earth burst out from underneath him, hitting him in the abdomen and sending him hurtling back into the air. Gaara took advantage of the situation and launched himself at the airborne Uchiha, hitting him quickly and forcefully, sending him flying backwards. Without any time to recover, Sasuke skidded across the ground, blinded by the sand and dirt that got into his eyes. After shooting at him and making a hand gesture, Gaara's naginata materialized in a whirlpool of sand, and he struck the Uchiha with its blunt end. Sasuke crashed into the wall after being flung backwards. With the blade aimed at a crucial spot, Gaara started to spin his naginata and charged at Sasuke. Sasuke opened his eyes slowly, just long enough to catch a glimpse of light before a terrible stabbing pain shot through his chest. "You should have surrendered," Gaara said dispassionately as he twisted the naginata in Sasuke's chest, causing blood to flow from the wound. And Sasuke crying out in agony, "Og!" Sasuke's hand shot up in a futile attempt to remove the naginata, slicing it open as he did so. As he started to press the naginata further into the wound, Gaara gave him a blank stare. With blood streaming from his mouth and reddening his teeth, Sasuke gritted his teeth in agony and slowly glanced up at Gaara. His lips formed a smirk. With bewildered eyebrows, Gaara started to remove the naginata from Sasuke's chest. It didn't even move an inch. "What?" Gaara's eyes widened in bewilderment as he started pulling harder on his naginata, but it remained immobile. In an attempt to extract the naginata, he extended his arm to grasp its hilt. He was unable to move his arm. "Why can't I move?" Gaara asked, her eyes widening even more. When he saw it, his eyes darted to Sasuke and specifically to the spot where his naginata had been buried in his chest. As a child, he had killed numerous enemies in a variety of ways after losing his temper because he was shunned, despised by his village. He spent hours torturing one of his opponents, crushed them with his sand, and sliced them open with kunai. During all of this, he developed a close understanding of the anatomy of the human body. Gaara was therefore completely certain when he saw the wound on Sasuke's chest, where his naginata had sliced through bone, muscle, and flesh. That's not the proper appearance for the inside of a rib. Genjutsu. In the stands, the audience gazed at the arena in confusion. As they attempted to figure out what in the world was happening, conversations started to fly around. One civilian asked a shinobi seated next to them, "Why did that haired boy kick the air?" The Uchiha was right in front of him. As perplexed as the civilian, the shinobi shrugged and said, "I have no idea, the Suna shinobi could have won the round right there if he wanted to." Around them, both civilians and shinobi were attempting to understand what was happening, and the civilian glanced back, still bewildered. Gaara had built a pillar in the center of the arena, but why? Why had he thrust his naginata at nothing after opening it? He twisted his naginata in the dirt, but why? All of these inquiries reverberated through the stands, but the remaining Jinchuriki had witnessed what had transpired in the Chunin hopefuls' waiting area. Instead, Fu saw it and informed the others. Just before Gaara closed his eyes, Sasuke had triggered his Sharingan, and a burst of chakra erupted from him. Gaara then launched an attack on an opponent who had never existed in the first place. They were aware that Sasuke had somehow subdued Gaara with a genjutsu, but they couldn't figure out why Gaara was unaware of it. Why hadn't he let out a burst of chakra since he had undoubtedly witnessed Sasuke activate his Sharingan? Why hadn't Shukaku informed him of his genjutsu status? Gaara, how could he have missed it earlier? Gaara swore. "Kai," he snapped, sending his chakra rushing through his coils. Sasuke's body disintegrated, the blood disappeared, the ragged clothing evaporated, and the genjutsu started to fade. Gaara. The sound of Shukaku's voice shouting, "Mother," made Gaara jump. "What occurs?" "I have been shouting for you since that Uchiha activated his Sharingan, why didn't you answer?" Gaara's bewildered gaze said, "Sharingan? He didn't turn on his Sharingan, mother." "What? But you looked into his eyes the moment he activated them. You saw them activate. How d?" "Gaara, move." Shukaku's voice reverberated in Gaara's mind. "Mother, what is?" Gaara stopped talking to himself in his head as he felt a huge surge of chakra behind him, his confusion only growing. Kaden. Taiyoke's no jutsu. Gaara turned his head just in time to witness a powerful flash of white light and a searing heat beam directly at him. Boom. In the stands, in an attempt to gain a better view of the white fire explosion that had hit Gaara, the entire crowd rose to their feet. It wasn't until Sasuke attacked that they realized what he had been doing because they had been so focused on what Gaara had been doing. At that point, all they could see was a stream of white flames shooting toward Gaara before colliding with the Suna Jinchuriki. The arena. Sasuke was struggling to stay upright in the arena, his breathing labored. He stared at the place where his technique struck Gaara. He hadn't had a sensei, a teacher, or anything else for the past month. Without any guidance from a sensei, he was forced to work independently. He had searched the library of the Uchiha clan for anything that would help him outwit his rivals. In his clan's training grounds, He had practiced every technique he could find until he passed out. He would frequently wake up in the middle of the training field, sore and exhausted, before getting back up and continuing his training. He was constantly planning, scheming, and strategizing how he could beat his opponents before they could defend themselves. He had been restless and sleep-deprived for days, trying to figure out how he could beat his opponents in a way that would give him the edge he required. Expecting to see an injured Gaara, Sasuke gazed into the flaming cloud where Gaara had been standing. Not a broken hot glass dome. Gaara stood tall inside the hot glass dome, his arms crossed, his teeth clenched in agony as he slowly uncrossed them. A stab of pain went through his forehead and arms. He glanced at his arms as his eyes moved downward. He had glass all over the back of his arms and part of the back of his hands. He had been struck by something hot enough to melt his sand armor. He felt a burning sensation on his fingertips as he gritted his teeth and moved his hand towards his forehead. He had also glassed the sand armor on his forehead. Gaara swore. Shukaku said to himself, "Gaara, something is wrong." "What is it, mother?" Gaara asked, slowly starting to move as he attempted to pry the glass off of his body as painlessly as possible. "Your wounds, I am having a hard time healing them. The jutsu the Uchiha used on you was laced with demon Yuki." "What?" Gaara's eyes widened in surprise. It is impossible for him to have progressed to the point where he can charge demon Yuki into his jutsu. It is the only explanation. It would explain why you don't remember seeing him activate his Sharingan. Gaara asked, perplexed. "Mother, what do you mean?" he asked, in excruciating pain, as he started to pry the glass off the back of his arms. Shukaku was silent for a minute, before she spoke. "When he activated his Sharingan, he cast a multi-layered genjutsu on you. I didn't notice it at first, but I managed to examine it as you were releasing it. The first layer made you believe that you were fighting a physical representation of the Uchiha. The second layer created a landscape illusion all around you. It was subtle, as the genjutsu didn't create a new environment around you. It only altered your perception of the existing world, for example, making you think you saw the Uchiha's shadow when it wasn't there. Thus when you used a jutsu you thought you were attacking the Uchiha himself. The third layer made you lose perception of where the Uchiha really was. Thus your focus was solely on the genjutsu representation of him. The fourth layer of the genjutsu altered the genjutsu representation of the Uchiha so that whenever you struck him, it did damage that was realistic. However, this layer was flawed, which is understandable. I do not think the Uchiha has ever truly seen the inside of another ninja. The fifth layer supplied sensory input information, while cutting off all your other senses, which is why you could not hear me shouting for you. The sixth layer of the genjutsu, it made you forget he had ever activated his Sharingan. He must have known that if his Sharingan was activated, you would have been able to connect the dots sooner and release the genjutsu. The pain in Gaara's burnt arms, which had deep, agonizing burn marks from Sasuke's jutsu turning his sand armor into glass while it was still on his body, temporarily vanished as his eyes widened. Gaara was astounded to learn about such a powerful and intricate genjutsu. It was challenging enough to multi-layer a genjutsu, but adding a layer that caused forgetfulness. That was extremely challenging and something that a human could never accomplish, which meant only one thing. Sasuke was no longer human. Gaara was concerned about one thing, though. Why the complicated genjutsu? Sasuke had only used one strong jutsu against him. It struck Gaara at that moment. Whatever jutsu Sasuke was using either required charging in order to use it or had more hand seals than he could run through quickly enough to make it effective against him. In any case, using it took time Gaara could have used to practically eliminate him from the technique. Sasuke had put a lot of faith in that jutsu to win him the battle because he had used the genjutsu to buy himself time to use that particular jutsu. As his skin gradually started to heal, Gaara glanced down at his arms. It was highly likely that the demon Yuki was lacing his jutsu. In fact, it was the only explanation for why his wounds were not healing more quickly. If so, Gaara wanted to put an end to this battle before Sasuke could defend himself. With a neutral expression on his face, Gaara emerged from the glass dome and turned to face the Uchiha. Sasuke looked visibly shaken. Gaara's belief that jutsu was his best chance was obviously accurate. Before reaching up to his forehead and quickly tearing the glass off of it, exposing the burned flesh to the world, Gaara cracked his neck. When he saw the burned skin, Sasuke flinched visibly. As Shukaku's Yuki started to treat the burn, Gaara dropped the glass to the ground and crushed it beneath her feet. "Is that all you've got, Uchiha?" she asked. Sasuke ceased his gaze, growled at Gaara, and started to recite hand signals, saying, "Kaden. Gokaku no." Gaara lunged at Sasuke, slammed his fist into his face, and sent him flying backwards and skidding across the floor, silencing him. Gaara swung his naginata at Sasuke before his feet had even touched the floor. Sasuke was able to straighten himself out, trying to anticipate Gaara's next move while his Sharingan eyes were spinning frantically. "Ah!" he exclaimed as the sharp end of the naginata slashed across his cheek, penetrating deeply enough to sever the bone. Gaara didn't stop there. He swung the naginata's blunt end at Sasuke and smashed it into his ribs, causing him to lose consciousness. Sasuke attempted to fill his lungs, but he staggered back. Without giving him a chance, Gaara slammed the blunt end's tip into Sasuke's ribs, sending him flying backwards and cracking several. Sasuke crashed into the adjacent wall and hit the ground with his face down. When Gaara noticed Sasuke's precarious position, he swung his naginata downward toward him, sending Shukaku's Yuki tearing through his body. When Sasuke slowly raised his head, he saw the sharp end of the naginata coming straight at him, and his eyes widened in horror. Clang! Sasuke gaped in disbelief as the naginata nearly touched his forehead before being halted by a pair of kunai, which were wielded by Kakashi Hitaki. With his burns gone, Gaara glared at Kakashi and said, "Move Hitaki-san." Kakashi just gave Gaara a glare and said, "No." Gaara scowled and started to exert more force on the naginata. If the Uchiha hadn't scrambled back like a mouse stuck in a drain pipe, the naginata would have sliced into Sasuke. Kakashi pressed harder against Gaara's naginata and tightened his hold on his kunai. When Hayate finally reached them, he said, "Enough." Due to Kakashi Hitaki's interference, the winner of this round is Gaara no Sabaku. He turned to face Gaara and said, "Cease and desist, now." Gaara looked at Hayate, and for an instant it appeared as if he would oppose him, but then he pulled out his naginata, snarled in the direction of the exit, and left without saying anything. One by one, Kakashi shrugged his shoulders, letting out a sigh as his body grew sore from the strain of holding Gaara back. Meanwhile, Sasuke was gasping for air, his eyes were wide with terror, and the black marks left by the curse seal were gradually becoming more visible on his body. Alongside the Jinchuriki, Gaara quickly made his way back to the other Jinchuriki, who were all waiting for him. The first thing that Utakata said when he arrived was, "Quite the fight, brother. I am surprised you got caught in the Uchiha's genjutsu. I figured you would have seen through it." "Yeah, what gives, brother?" Fu said next. "The Uchiha trapped me in a multi-layered genjutsu, made me think I was fighting him, cut me off from all outside connections, the genjutsu providing all the sensory input to make me believe I was fighting him," Gaara said, reaching up to the edge and feeling Shukaku's Yuki heal his burned and scarred flesh. Such a sophisticated genjutsu as this startled the other Jinchuriki. Gaara went on, "Because of it, mother was cut off from me, and I believed I was harming the Uchiha." Karabi said, "But, even if he did all that, you saw him activate his Sharingan, you should have been able to connect the dots?" "The last layer of the genjutsu made me forget he had ever activated the Sharingan," Gaara said, slowly turning his head. Everyone knew the implications of such a genjutsu, so they all fell silent at that point. As Yugito put it, ninja cannot perform genjutsu strong enough to make somebody forget, no matter how powerful. As Gaara went on, Amaru's eyes grew wide. "So, that means that if Sasuke isn't a demon yet," she added. "He soon will be." Yugura said, "If that is the case, why didn't you just kill him? You could have overpowered Hitaki-san, and the proctor would not have been able to stop you." Gaara exhaled. "They already suspect something is going on, Yugura. We don't need to give them any more reason to suspect." After listening to the discussion with interest, Naruto finally raised his hand and said, "Speaking of which, Kitsunji Sensei spoke to me. He said that our Biju have something to discuss with us." With haste, the other Jinchuriki covered his hand. All of them were drawn into the mindscape. The mindscape. Entering the mindscape, the 10 Jinchuriki staggered. They noticed their Biju observing them while they were all in their human forms. "What is it you wanted to tell us, Kitsunji Sensei?" Naruto asked, turning to face Kitsunji. Naruto was staring at Kitsunji. "You all know what is coming next. You will all be fighting each other, one by one. You also know what awaits the victor." A nod was given by the other Jinchuriki. Kokonai made a statement, "Because of this, we all agree that since you are all to fight one another, to ensure all of you are on even ground, none of you will be allowed to use our Yuki while fighting one another." Roshi approached and inquired, "Why is that?" As to why they were prohibited from using their Yuki. Hidoro responded quickly, "This is a test to see which amongst you is most worthy. If you use our Yuki, then the one with the stronger Biju will win out in the end, regardless of the skill of the individual. This is your test, not ours." Leaning on a Buramushi, Senio laughed and said, "I thought you would have gotten that? The fights you will partake in shall change all of you, but only if you fight on your own, Without our help this time, Kitsunji said with a sigh as he turned to face them. I understand. Naruto nodded his head and turned to face the other Jinchuriki. I think we all understand. The other Jinchuriki also gave a head nod. All right then, smiled Kanedzuchi, now leave this place. The Jinchuriki left the mindscape in a flash of light, leaving the 10 Biju inside to await the final conclusion of their own Jinchuriki's inevitable conflict. With a sigh, Suizuki leaned back and muttered, so, it begins. Her only answer was silence.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.